Hey,
Welcome to the live stream. We're here with Drac, who is going to be speaking at Self-Reliance Festival, and I've just met him on video for the first time. I've seen you on video, but this is like actual interactive Drac video. Drac, tell us who you are and why did you end up on this crazy live stream with John Willis and Nicole Sauce?
You know, that's a question I ask myself constantly. This is one of my most unique and just really cool friendships. And I find that you develop those by just being a genuine dude, going to trade shows and being on the internet. But my name's Drac. I have been making toys, toy modification. I own a small toy development company. We make props occasionally for different studios and stuff like that. We're really a fabrication sort of workshop. And because of that, in the last 5 years or so, 3D printing's been around for about a decade. But outside of like college classrooms and STEM programs and like rep studios, it's really blown up in the last, I would say 5 or 6 years, to the degree that now you can buy. I mean, this is one of my favorite jokes. This one literally looks like a microwave. You can buy them off the shelf, ready to go, pre-calibrated, sometimes even fully pre-assembled in such a way that you can do just incredible things. Because while most people in this circle, and I think in the world in general, are very familiar with reductive manufacturing, which is how basically anything industrial gets made. That's, you start with a block of aluminum, you take pieces away until you have the part you need. You start with a tube, you weld things to it. Things like that. I mean, a lot of reductive manufacturing, additive manufacturing, the way that 3D printing works is just so novel and allows you to make shapes and jigs and tools. But the thing that I think is so relevant to this conversation is it's repeatable, which means that if I make a tool or I make a jig to make a thing, whether that's, a bracket that lets you turn PVC into a chicken coop, whether that's, something that makes things that go boom a little more exciting or a little more compatible with other accessories, or just something that makes your toys shoot extra hard. That file can be uploaded, that file can be shared, and then it's easy to replicate, to retool, to recalibrate. And so while additive manufacturing is really cool, additive design has kind of followed hand in hand with that, where if I make a part and you decide that there's a better way to make that part, you can change my file to make the part, test that, and then send it back to me, and we'll have a completely new thing based on the old thing. And so you get into Creative Commons, you get into kind of the ethics of sharing your technology and your information, which, everybody at the SOE compound, everybody on your podcast is very familiar with. I don't think that anybody's hiding their secrets to success. And certainly we're the same over here at my company.
Yeah, I think hiding secrets to success is a fool's game. You might as well share that so more people are successful, so the whole ecosystem grows. I've never really understood this like hide it under the rug approach to the world.
Yeah, rising tide, all boats.
Yeah, that.
Man, I think
a bigger pie for all people, all of those things.
I think you totally downplayed your intro there, Drac.
I was just going to say that John hides his secrets to success because I always see him 3 hours late. I wake up at 7 a.m. and I missed the 4 a.m. This is what we're doing today, and I'm trying to get on that level where
I'll tell you, I'm the 6 a.m. So I'm 2 hours late to his every time. I'm happy at 6.
I'm lucky because sometimes I'll be going to bed when he posts his good morning thing. It's when it's like really cold outside and he's doing the snow crunching gravel ones.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, good night. Kind of depends on what he's up to, but yeah, I'm excited for the festival. Like I said, it's new territory to me. My nonprofit runs a major invitational in June every year, and because of a lot of the things that are going on in the world right now, renting a college campus to bring a bunch of people together is more complicated than it used to be, just from a logistics perspective. So the only window that I could get in the academic calendar for my host university this year was in July, which means for the first time ever, I can do what is, I've missed all of the 4th of July parties. I've missed the big shindig every year. And now you're doing this, and it lines up perfectly with my schedule. So I'm really, really excited to meet everybody. And, in this instance, given the kind of theming of it, I feel like at the 4th of July party, what do? I bring out a couple of cool SBRs, and everybody's like, oh, okay, this guy Cerakote and toys. But in this case, I can share with you the thing that I'm actually good at, the thing that, you know, I make a living doing, which is additive manufacturing, technology, props, stuff like that. I mean, I think that I'm bringing some examples of things. I'm bringing some design elements. I'm actually going to bring one of my machines. And while I'm sure that most people have seen Instagram videos and time lapses and all sorts of stuff about 3D printing, I find that while it's very prevalent in academia and very prevalent in STEM or STEAM as it's known, I think that, you know, the general public, you could still catch people who have never seen one of these machines, who, you know, don't really understand the merit of them in a world where they're not cheap. It depends on kind of your use case, but like, you know, the fact that I can print a custom wrench or grommet or something to that effect is really cool. But
yeah,
if that's all you want to do with it, buying an $800 machine doesn't make any sense. Go buy the wrench. But in a world where you see like, oh, it's not just for that, I could do 1,000 things with it. Now all of a sudden, you know, by the time you're on your 5th fix with your 3D printer, all of a sudden that $800 seems a lot more reasonable. And you're like, man, this was an okay idea. And then when you're on your 20th, you're like, why doesn't everybody have one of these?
Yeah.
And so
I think people overlook them, you know, because they've become available at Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart. So
Right.
we assume toy, right? We associate it with kids and just making, you know, widgets and things. But I mean, they're at a level now where they're not going away. And I mean, I know you had printed some stuff that had wood in the filament, and it came out looking like wood, and you put metal pillars in them, and you do all kinds of stuff.
Oh my gosh. So I chose my location today on purpose, but I have a lot of machines behind me, and that's where things get like really crazy. Is you're absolutely right. You see the MakerBot one at Home Depot, you see the Dremel branded one, and the sad reality is that those aren't very good machines. They wind up being the best 3D printers are usually made in the Czech Republic, and the second best 3D printer is the one that you made yourself. A lot of these kind of designs, your standard XY gantry, which is where where do we start here? I don't know who's watching or if we're getting live feedback or anything like that, but a 3D printer is effectively a computer-controlled hot glue gun. And what it does is it takes a spool of plastic like this. This is a big coil. It's 1 kilogram of nylon. And it feeds that at a consistent rate into the hot glue gun nozzle. And then the computer moves the hot glue gun, in most cases, on an XY axis. And then after it does a layer, it goes up and it makes another layer and it goes up. And then there's like infinite variations on that. You can use a gantry where pulleys pull it. And instead of being an XY, it's kind of a circular build platform where you move it like a marker, I guess. And then there's these ones behind me are actually resin printers, where instead of building up, you build out of a tube of resin. So the resin is fluid, like what would happen for your filling at the dental office. And then a high-powered UV laser hits the bottom of the platform, builds a layer, and then it pulls out of the goo a little bit, another layer. And so you end up building kind of upside down. And all of those different materials, because hot glue is really just a matrix. And the most popular thing would be PLA, which is polylactic acid. And that's a plastic that's pseudo biodegradable. It smells like cornstarch when it's printing, which a lot of people like. Once you get into this, you're like, it smells like I'm making something. What it really smells like is super bad popcorn. But
that's what coffee roasting smells like, actually.
Yeah, you get used to it. Any smell becomes attractive when you like know that it's like productive or what have you. Like I'm sure that John walks outside and he's like, smells like chicken shit. But also, like, that's food. Like, yeah. And so John's absolutely right. I mean, I've done inserts where you make the filament. This is a steel, and you'll note that this is a much heavier, much larger roll. But this is 60% plastic, 40% steel powder. So that has very interesting properties. You can actually use that for things that you want to rust, and that tends to be more of an artistic and less of a functional thing. But you do get a greater heat resistance from something like that. The nylon has carbon fiber in it. Sometimes you use a continuous strand of carbon fiber, and that's where you get like industrial brackets where you're like, I printed it. It's kind of like a toy, but also it'll hold 1,200 pounds. So like, you know, instead of replacing the winch on my truck with one that I bought from Toyota, I could just print one. Now those materials get more expensive, and you're maybe margin of savings there isn't as big. But I think that one way that all of that applies to what, you know, we're talking about and what we do is, while you can start thinking about like, what would it cost to replace this part, or what would it cost to make this part, and then comparing that to the cost of 3D printing it and reducing the cost of the machine, the thing that's often overlooked that I find that I really value in my business is the time. So I can go on Amazon and I can be like, oh man, I need a custom box to hold this battery to mount onto this toy, whatever it is. And I'll be like, all right, great. That's a triple AA setup in a triangle or whatever. And I can find that on Amazon and it's $8 and it's prime shipping. It's like, it's only $8. But then I lose 2 days on the project waiting for the Amazon truck. And I've got guys sitting with their thumbs twiddling, being like, hey boss, what do you want me to do? And the fact that instead of doing that and waiting that 48 hours for the supply chain to catch up to me, and there's never been a better time to illustrate failures of the supply chain, I can instead be like, hey, I need a triangle extruded to this length with these brackets for these pins, and we're just going to make it and we're going to be done in 30 minutes. And they're not always that fast or that easy, but it's, you know, frequently doing it yourself is faster and cheaper by virtue of I don't have to buy $5 gas to drive to the post office or to drive to Home Depot. I don't have to spend 2 hours of my life figuring out where it is in Home Depot, trying to figure out which elbow bracket I'm going to need. Do I need conduit versus regular schedule 40, etc. It's like, you know what? Why don't I just make the thing that's exactly what I need for this job, so that I get the flow rate that's exactly what I need, so that I can move on with my life and my project. And I find that part, in addition to being very satisfying personally, also is impossible to quantify, because like, depending on who you are and what your time's worth, maybe you should just go to Home Depot. But if your time is very valuable, and you know, your gas is universally more valuable than it's ever been, then I think that part makes it start making a lot of sense. And I firmly believe that in, you know, everybody's got that 5-year, 10-year horizon where they're like, in 10 years, we'll have aquatic automobiles and we'll be taking helicopters with jet thrusters on them to work. But I do think that in 10 years, we will have a much greater saturation of 3D printers in homes. I think that if it's not the sheer utility of them reaching kind of the general population, I think that the academic sense of them is going to be very adopted. I think that your kid is going to need a 3D printer to do a school project, and he'll have one at school in the lab. And once he's got one at school, like, you want to be a good dad and make sure that he has the tool that he needs at home, in the same way that every household has a TI-83, even though most people aren't doing Fourier transforms. Like, most houses will wind up with some sort of 3D printer of some variety, and kind of just how we choose to adopt those is going to be up to us.
Yeah, it's interesting to me on the how to adopt thing, because a lot of our space, the entry to 3D printers, or the reason to do it, is a Second Amendment reason, which could be a reason. But as a homesteader and as somebody who runs a product-based business, every so often there is just a thing I want that is a weird shape, and I can either pay somebody like you or somebody who does this to make that weird shape on their 3D printer, or if I have a 3D printer and I don't want to deal with designing it, I can pay a designer to send me the design if it's custom. And it's, as you said, it's instant. It's right then. And for me, that's better than trying to figure out how to carve it out of a piece of wood with a chisel, or all of the other things we used to do in a machining sense of trying. And that happens all the time. It's not just a chicken tractor piece. Like, I want a rack for my coffee bags to hold them upright when I have coffee beans in them so they don't spill. And that's a very specific grid configuration that would totally be printable.
I mean, I think John could speak to this really well. Like, from an organization perspective, having a 3D printer makes exactly what you're describing, especially if you're a small business owner. I mean, we use our machines to make products that we sell to customers. We sell a lot of grips. We sell a lot of scope mounts. We sell a lot of fully printed blasters and toys and stuff like that. But I mean, we have 40 3D printers running pretty much 18 hours a day, every day in my workshop. And my husband just designed a thing for camping last night. It holds the tarp on the end of a trekking pole. It looks like a Mickey Mouse shape. Yeah, and I bet it fits perfectly. And if it doesn't, print another one.
Yeah.
And if it breaks, print another one. Like, that's disposable tools are very cool. They're all lightweight because they're made of PLA, or carbon fiber nylon weighs next to nothing. The rolls that are a kilogram look huge because you don't realize that a kilogram of plastic at that volume is the volume that it is. But what I was going to say is, I think
once we have it where it is, couldn't we make it so it won't break out of a different material?
Right, exactly. So you can use the cheaper, the lighter, the $20 roll of filament to get the dimensional accuracy exactly where you want. And then once you have that dialed in, within reason, you change the heat setting, you run it off in nylon, and now you have something that's tougher than an injection molded part. And I know that becomes kind of a hot button topic in 3D printing land, because injection molding, people think is like this magical machine that makes parts that are super duper strong, because there's Happy Meal toys that are 30 years old that are still tricks effectively. But there's, within reason, as long as your printing layer lines go against your axes of stress, like 3D printing is very strong. I put 20 kilogram springs in rifles and shoot them made entirely of 3D printed bodies, and they're very durable. The grips don't torsion off, anything like that. And that was like a big surprise that people kind of adopted in my hobby a while ago. They were like, oh, these are perfectly.
Let's let our ATF agent that's watching this know that you mean Nerf guns.
I am talking specifically about toy guns, blasters that shoot foam darts. Yeah, for the I would appreciate. I love my dog.
I love my dog. That's exactly right.
So I know you can get a box that prints some things for a few $100. I assume there's multi-$1,000 units. A guy who hasn't done this, what's the all-inclusive cost to get something ready to go, a unit that's not at the very bottom, but maybe a couple levels that he's not going to outgrow in a year or two for a hobbyist?
So I was gonna. It's the machine that I'm gonna bring to your festival. Is the machine. It's called a Prusa Mini. It comes from the Czech Republic. It's under the cost of like an import tax. So for about 500 United States dollars all in, you're going to get a machine that has a bed about the size of a printer box, a little bit smaller than this. You're going to get a spool of filament. The software is free. It's open source. It's updated frequently. And that is a beautiful machine. There's actually 5 of them in the rack on the bottom shelf down there. They're super compact. So for my purposes is like what is now, I didn't used to think of it this way, but for what I run, which is effectively a print farm, having consistency in my machines, having something that's affordable, that's cheap, that I'm not getting VAT taxes on, where the parts are all just standard issue metric parts. The belts are easy to replace. The screws are easy to replace. And I like to use the microwave as an example, because 5 years ago when I was talking about 3D printing, I would tell people 3D printing isn't like a microwave. You are getting into a new hobby. You are going to learn a new skill. You are going to break things. This is not throw it in a 40-year-old microwave, just add 30 seconds until my chicken is warm. Like, you're going to learn some new stuff. That's no longer the case. They are closer to microwaves than they've ever been before. You can realistically buy a Prusa Mini, put it on the thing, set it up using the software, send it a file. And, with a very small calibration kind of window, about 15 minutes, you can start hitting add 30 seconds and get your warm chicken. Like, it's pretty stupid proof in that regard. If you're capable of using the internet to buy a machine from the Czech Republic, you are already at the level of smart that you need to be with technology to run the machine. So I think that $500 is kind of the current threshold of entry. And if you're looking for a project, you can do it for $250. Like, you can buy a clone of what's effectively the larger Prusa, which, I mean, this guy, Joseph Prusa, he sort of pioneered the completely open source XY gantry printer. And so his company is very influential. They've created a lot of standards for bed size, volume, heating elements, etc. within the hobby. But you can get a knockoff of that from China for about $200. And with, $50 to throw at your filament and shipping costs, you could be up and running. Now that's more what I'm talking about 5 years ago, where it's like, all right, now you need to know something about mechanical, you need to know something about electrical. You probably need to know a little bit of something about, at least basic computer modeling, because now you're making your own files, etc. Yeah, so Joshua says there are printers you can buy right now that are 4x4x4.5 for just over $500. And
that's chef right there. That's
true.
Chef,
very cool. The ones behind me, like I said, the resin printers tend to be pretty expensive. This is a belt printer up top. This prints things on a moving belt, so that if you want to, and the big cheesy thing that you use it for is you use it for like fantasy swords. So like guys with costumes or girls with costumes that want like a 5-foot long sword, they used to print them in 1-foot sections and then throw a dowel rod in the center to make them strong enough to go, up and down escalators at convention centers. Now you can print them on a belt as a continuous extrusion, and they'll spit off as all one piece, which is pretty cool. The one behind that is what's called a Creality CR10 Max, and that's I want to say that's a 500 by 500 by 500, and that was about $1,100 2 years ago. But once you have one and you found a use case for it, because I imagine virtually everyone attending this festival has a use case for something, you'll be amazed how quickly it pays for itself and it becomes just a regular thing. So we schedule prints in the morning. We let them run all day. We reset half the machines at about 2 o'clock. We let those run through the night. The average uptime of them are about 18 hours a day, which is insane. I did get a visit from the police at one point because it turns out that I consume more electricity in my residence than the rest of my street combined. I'll let you guys kind of assume that they
did they take any samples?
I think I played it very well. So they knocked on the door. It was 2 officers. They were pretty polite. I opened the door. I was like, "Good morning. What can I do for you?" And they were like, "We'd like to search your house." And I'm like, "I'd like for you to come back with a warrant, please." And they were like, "We have a warrant."
Holy shit.
I'm like, "Well, can I read it?" And they showed it to me, and I was like, "This is a warrant to search my house." Yeah. Can I get you guys a Coke? And they were like, "Well, that's not what we expected." And I'm like, "No, I mean, if you're here because I use a lot of electricity, I use a lot of electricity." And they were like, And they went downstairs. They saw the toys. They saw the prototyping. They saw the solvents. They were initially a little concerned because there's a wall at my main workshop that looks basically like the one behind me, except instead of lightsabers, it has toy guns on it. Some of those toy guns don't look like toy guns. They were like, I'm like, "Listen, you can pick up anything you want. They're all toys. There are some not toys. I will tell you if you want to look at the not toys, but they are in a safe." And they were like, it took about 10 minutes before they finally were like, "This is really cool. My kid would like one of these." I'm like, "I sell them online, and I'm really glad that you aren't arresting me." This was not how I thought my morning would go. My staff was shocked. They were like, "What's happening?" I'm like, "We have new friends."
So can I put this thing out in the garage here where I run anywhere from 40 degrees out here, maybe to 110 degrees? Does temperature?
So temperature affects different plastics. So the machine itself is going to be great. In those operating conditions, 40 to 110 in your garage, no issue. The plastics will react differently to different situations. A lot of guys, like, you'll note that the resin printers, this is a full enclosure, right? So the actual machine is in there, and then we close it, and that's so that the humidity, that's so that the temperature of kind of the goo stays consistent. The hot glue gun style, which are the open air additive where you're pulling a spool of plastic in, as long as the bed and the nozzle are pretty much aligned, like the bed stays about 50 degrees Celsius, the nozzle stays about 220 degrees Celsius, that's pretty good. Now, people have had issues where, like, a cold blast of air, something sudden, will warp the part off of the bed, and now you're printing spaghetti into an empty space, and that's no good. Failure is part of the process, but like I said, 5 years ago, I'd be telling you that it was nothing like a microwave. Nowadays, even if you don't know what you're doing, your failure rate's going to be pretty small. It's very impressive how the recovery options, your power can blip these days, and the print will recover exactly where it was in its G code, which is a big deal for me, running as many machines as I do on a consistent basis on a power grid that was built in the 20s. I definitely think that your garage would be suitable. Certainly, I think that if you were going to do something that's more prone to warping, like ABS plastic, which is a very popular thermoplastic for injection molding. I was talking about Happy Meal toys earlier. Happy Meal toys, Nerf guns from Hasbro, all made of ABS plastic. It's really good for injection molding. That when you're printing it, because it is temperature sensitive, you want to make sure that the conditions that you dial it in at are pretty much the conditions that it runs at and that it doesn't get interrupted very often. Hot is better than cold. So like, you said that your garage gets up to 90 degrees, the printer's not going to care. In fact, it's going to work way less hard if it's hot in the garage. If it's cold, it's going to have to work way harder to keep its hot end hot, to keep its hot bed hot. And so you're going to consume more electricity. But the power supply on these things it pumps enough juice, theoretically, that as long as it's not literally freezing, so 40 degrees would be fine.
So is there any fumes or toxics or anything?
So, microplastics are a common topic nowadays, and the fumes, so to speak, like they all smell different. When I print the wood filament, it smells like burning sawdust because it's effectively sawdust trapped in a plastic matrix that is being burned. But in general, PLA is safe inside. ABS, you want to have some kind of venting if you're doing a lot of it. And so all I can do is, I'm not a doctor. I can speak to my own personal experience. I sleep in a house that has 40 printers running 18 hours a day. I'm not dead yet. Now I print pretty much exclusively in PLA. With various matrices added to it. I don't do a lot of ABS because ABS is by far the more dangerous one. I think that there would be some adverse effects if I was doing all ABS all the time. But once you get into it, one printer running a spool every so often is not going to, affect your health greatly. I have hired interns before who come from college dorm situations where they'd have two printers in their dorm room with them. Running all the time, and they were running things like ABS, which does give off fumes that aren't super duper good for you. I think that if, whatever my next workshop looks like, there's going to be a dedicated ventilation system for the room that has the printers in it that kind of pulls the air out so that we could do more ABS and stuff like that. But particularly from a hobbyist perspective, your standard one or two printers running PLA plastic, which is the 95% of what people do, is not gonna hurt you in any sort of measurable way. I think that you can't walk anywhere in California without somebody telling you that you're about to have birth defects and cancer.
I mean, you can't sell anything in California without a cancer warning on it, as near as I can tell.
There's plenty of companies that won't even sell shit to California over that nonsense. I know guys buy laser units, right? We can buy a laser cutter for 10 grand, flatbed, it'll nest and do all the stuff. But there's a lot of other things that go with that. Your air handling system costs more than the laser cutter costs.
So when you laser Cordura, which I think is effectively melting Cordura, right?
Yeah, we do not. We still.
I was going to say I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question. We're going back to the beginning of time here. Where is a beginner's starting place with 3D printing? So talk to me like I am smart 6-year-old you, and I've just heard of this 3D printing thing. Like, what do I do next?
6-year-old me was not that smart.
Okay.
6-year-old me would go back to throwing rocks, I think. So I think that a good starting place, like I said, is it sounds so cheesy because I run a YouTube channel to say I would start on YouTube, but YouTube's just such a terrific free resource for information. I think that the first thing that I would do is just get a second opinion. Thanks, John. I would check out just some use cases. I would see what other people are doing. I would, stand on their shoulders. What do you want to do with a 3D printer? And I would find somebody who's doing that with a 3D printer and see kind of what equipment they use, because I can tell you which printers I use. I use mostly the Prusa Minis. I use the larger form, which is called the Prusa Mark III. It's technically the Prusa Mark III Plus is now the one that they sell, but they're effectively the same thing. When I want something that's cheap, like a big printer that's cheap, I'll buy a Creality, which is just a big Prusa knockoff. but it runs mostly the same way. And I think that those are really good starter machines. Any one of those, the Prusas tend to be fast, but they're small. The Crealities tend to be much larger, but they're slow. So if you only need to print things that are, X by X, then I would definitely go with the Prusa. But if you're over here telling me that you need, this by this, then I would get a Creality and just accept that, you might have some 30-hour prints and all of the hiccups that come with the longer something runs, the more a small mistake will become exponentially a larger mistake. But I think I would start by YouTubing the machine that you think that you want to start with. I would look at some reviews for that machine and see what people made with it for their review process. And then once you've done that, I would start looking at materials and be like, is this material compatible with the machine that I want? And then, it sounds cliche because not everybody has $500 to blow on a new hobby or an experiment effectively. But I think that, it is a hands-on thing. The best way you're going to learn is by doing. You have to kind of go into it accepting like this is not going to be perfect immediately. But, with the knowledge that you're acquiring a skill ahead of the general population and that's going to pay dividends down the line in perpetuity while everybody else is figuring out how 3D printing works, you're going to know and have one. And this is a great one. Crystal says, look for a 3D printing club where I live. They have a 3D printer club that meets every month. I think that while you could probably find a 3D printing club, I think that what's far more popular is to look for a makerspace in the city.
Yep.
And makerspaces have usually an amateur lathe. They have like a Tormach, which is an intro CNC machine, which is reductive. And they all have 3D printers now. They have probably different levels of 3D printing. They probably have courses kind of teaching you like this is, what's the first thing that you want to do with a 3D printer? Generic free CAD software, generic cheap printer. And I'm sure that for like $20, they'll let you run it, print you something kitschy. I know that a lot of them charge by the print time on the machine. So it'll be like $3 an hour. So if you want to print a 3-hour print, you'll spend $9 and that knowledge will be very valuable. Also, if that's the vector that you choose to go with is like kind of the real life mentoring as opposed to the YouTube DIY. In that case, I would probably pick up whatever machine they have just because they know how to service it. They know how to change the hot end. They might have parts and when you inevitably reach your first jam, clog, hiccup, whatever it is, you'll be better positioned to kind of move forward through that as opposed to, when I was first getting into this, I bought a lot of printers off of Facebook Marketplace and a lot of printers because now my print farm is very consistent. And I found that the consistency of being able to use the same software on each machine saved me a lot of time and was very valuable. But in the beginning, when I didn't have any money, I found that finding a printer on Facebook Marketplace that was broken for $50 was an amazing deal. And I would buy 2 a weekend and I would spend, Monday night, 3 hours just cleaning them and clearing out the jam because 9 times out of 10, a broken 3D printer is dad bought this or got it for Father's Day or Christmas. The first time that the plastic clogged in the hot glue gun, he said, to hell with it, threw it in a bin. Now mom's tired of looking at it every weekend and wants it off her honey-do list. It's on Facebook Marketplace. She's thrilled to hand it to the quirky teenager that shows up at her doorstep. I don't recommend that because you don't want to start with a frustration.
Right.
But if you're so inclined, you can get to do it really cheap by buying a broken 3D printer and effectively unclogging it.
Well, and something we will talk a lot about at Self-Reliance Festival is developing your community and your network. And if you have a group of 4 or 5 people who are interested into getting into 3D printing and you kind of live near each other and $500 is a prohibitive number for you, is $100 a prohibitive number? Right. Like, I guess if $100 is a prohibitive number, it's time to take control of some other parts of your life before you get into 3D printing. Fair enough. 5 people can do a group buy. That's what freeze dryer clubs are doing. There are people starting to buy freeze dryers together as a group because they don't use it all the time. I use mine all the time, but
so that was my next question, right? We buy these $5,000 freeze dry units.
Yeah.
And we paid for ours in 30 days.
Right.
With freeze drying candy and selling it. But I mean, we have 75,000 people on my email list. So when I push that out, some people might not be able to, scale that quickly. You buy this unit, you're all in it with all your filament and everything. What's one of the first things you could build to pay that unit off? Like, what kind of side hustle could there be?
I got a reloader off of Amazon that was totally 3D printed when it arrived.
What do you mean?
Like just to get the bullets into my magazine.
Oh, like a Lula loader?
Oh, yeah, because my thumbs are weak.
No, that's, I mean, anything that's a proprietary jig that used to be like, you had to buy it from the company that made it because they had the mold or the model for the thing that's compatible with it. So I guess I can give you a few examples. One of my biggest pet peeves is that people will buy a 3D printer, they'll make themselves like a baby Groot, or they'll print their favorite Pokemon figure. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's a very, middle school project kind of thing. Like, print something you love and then there you go. Yeah, exactly. Like Hello Kitty. You can print stencils, cookie makers, and it'll always be like, I got a cookie cutter of, my favorite character or what have you, cartoon thing. And then they're like, oh, okay, great. I made the thing. I'm done. But if you are looking to ROI it, I really like the idea of, the average person is going to have a use case occasionally. So if you're the guy in your group of 5 guys that has the 3D printer, now you can trade that or share that knowledge with them. And they don't necessarily need to own a 3D printer and have this thing sitting in their garage. But, maybe they have a pressure washer and, occasionally you print them apart and they pressure wash your driveway. I don't want to delve into that too hard because most people want to do their own thing. But I find that if you can find a thing that you want with your 3D printer and you make it, and you're, in general, half the time you're not the first person to make it. And then you don't have to do the hard part. You could just go on the internet and be like, I really want this thing. And somebody else made it, and you could just have it and print it and be done. But if you have to make it yourself, or in your case, pay somebody to design it for you, that's true. Yeah. Thingiverse, there's a lot of different 3D printer or STL hubs or sources. But if you have to design it yourself, the chances are you're not the only person that wants that thing. And then that's the way that you kind of ROI your machine. So like a perfect example is you hate the cup holder in your truck because you drink exclusively Monster Energy, or you like Red Bull, but only the 8.4 ounces or whatever, right? Yeah. Like I drive a Subaru Outback. It's my, John's made a lot of jokes about the Subaru Outback, but it was the right car at the right time.
I have killed 2 of them in my life.
I would love to
kill them.
I would be amazed at myself if I could kill it.
I can kill yours if you need that done.
Sounds like a deal.
But it didn't wear out. Something happened to them.
No,
I actually think I'm gonna not bring it to the festival. So I mean, this is a real life example. I drive a Subaru Outback. It's a 2020 Subaru Outback. I drink Red Bull when I take long rides, and Red Bulls in the cup holders drive me up the wall because every time I turn, it tilts, and I'm always worried that if it's at that specific fluid level, it's going to tilt over, and then I'm spilling Red Bull in the cup holder next to it. It's a little thing, but 3D printers are really great at solving little thing problems, the kind of stuff that you would just deal with. I found that at first what I was doing is I was taking my partner's scrunchie, right? And I put her scrunchie on the Red Bull can, and that would kind of act as a buffer to keep it in the center so that it couldn't tilt. And I was like, okay, great. And then eventually when I got home, I was like, this is the easiest file. I have the inner diameter of the Subaru Outback cup holder, and then I have the outer diameter of an 8.4 ounce Red Bull can, and done. It's 2 cylinders, one with a hole in it, and now it's a perfect fit. And in addition to just being a nice little doohickey that sits in my car that does that thing for me, and I get to enjoy it once every 2 weeks, it feels good because every time you slide the can in, you're like, it's very satisfying. It's a perfect fit, and I made it, and it's for me, and it works great. And then I'm like, I bet other people feel this way. And I think it's been downloaded like 300 times. I don't know how many of those people made it. But if they did, and it helped anybody else, then it was super duper worth the 20 minutes I spent catting it out. It cost me virtually nothing to print. Yeah, Cody says he's got a Dremel 3D printer. And I think that the Dremel one uses proprietary CAD software, which is like my one hiccup is that you have to design a part, and then each printer has what's called a slicer, which turns the physical 3-dimensional object into effectively a lot of those layers for the hot glue gun's brain, so that it's like, okay, it's not a Pikachu, it's 100 layers of Pikachu in this order. And so the Dremel one, you might have some hiccups with. I've never used it, but I know that it's a lot like the MakerBots because it's made by the MakerBot people, if I'm not mistaken, where you have to use their software for their machine. And I'm sure that there's a way around that because there's a way to play Doom on your iPhone if you really want. But I generally like the more open source one. Yeah, I just realized I could print a power console for my trailer. I mean, again, stuff like that, infinite phone cases, battery bricks, things that sit on your nightstand that hold your keys specifically the way that you have them set up, your wallet. I mean, let me see if I've got it on me. I have a very unique wallet. I know John sells wallets, and I'm not going to tell you what the wallet is because I don't want to be rude, but we make these in Augusta, Georgia. They're metal Delrin end cap wallets. And like, obviously there's no tray. There's no.
Throw it out there. What is it? Are they available?
Yeah, we sell them online.
Yeah, I remember seeing them. Put it out there.
Yeah, it's called Scudo.
How do you spell that?
Italian for coin, SCUDO.
Yeah, they're badass.
Pardon?
Yeah, they're cool. I remember you showing me those.
It's got a ball pen detent, which opens it up like that.
Oh, cool.
But
I've been looking for a new wallet.
You should buy one of John's. They're really good. This one only holds credit cards. It doesn't hold cash.
I've always wanted a sleeve that would go in a cup holder that would hold the phone, right? Stationary. Right. So it's not, when you turn, the thing doesn't fall out of the cup holder into the passenger.
Exactly. And there's a lot of things where it's like, you maybe don't have to design the whole part. Like I have a lot of guys who, how do I put this? So some of my Nerf blasters use flywheels on 2 DC motors, right? The motors spin, they throw the dart. To get the motors into the cage, which is 3D printed, you have to kind of push them in a special sort of way. And if you get it wrong, then you'll bend the bell on the motor or the shaft on the motor. And then, nobody wants a crooked shaft. I built a jig that pushes the motors into the thing specifically. It kind of, you lock the motor in, it pushes that into the console that holds the motors. And I figured that you could print the whole thing, and then eventually you start kind of like rethinking things, and you're like, I don't have to print the whole thing. I have to print the part that's proprietary to me. So I print the thing that holds the motor, and I print the thing that holds the cage, and then you use a generic $1 Home Depot, Lowe's, they're all the same little, what do you call it? I feel very stupid. They're a vice grip, right? A clamp.
Yeah.
And then you use that and you slide them onto there, and now you have a tool that does that without having to, you get all of the beauty of an injection molded grip and a steel bar for aligning everything, and then all of the proprietary of 3D printing to hold your specific pieces. And so you wind up with a lot of hybrids like that, where I find that a lot of use cases are, I have a thing and it doesn't fit in this thing, and now I've bridged that with a custom 3D printed sleeve or part. There's tons of cell phone accessories, like John said, that it's like, how do I get my rear view mirror to hold my phone? And it's like, well, Belkin will sell you something that kind of does that for $60, or for $4 in filament, you could have something that does exactly that. And the nature of 3D printing is relatively precise. And so you frequently wind up with better than the generic, this is compatible with iPhones 8, 9, 10, red, blue, yellow, Y. It's like, well, this is compatible with my phone in my case that does my thing. So
when I got my 3D printer, which is now a year and a half ago, it first sat in the box under my bed for a whole year. And then over Christmas, when I take a week off, I started putting it together. It's now half assembled.
Is that the end of the story? Is that where we're at?
No, but what I did is I went on the Thingiverse and started looking at all of the things I can do from a pantry organizing standpoint, because we store spices and whatnot. And I realized that you can buy these ill-fitting things and hope they work, or you can get something exactly for your cabinet to hang on your cabinet door or whatever. And that has been the motivation to finish putting the stupid thing together that I
Good.
only got halfway through.
Well, if it's not done, you should bring it to the festival and I'll take a look at it. But I was going to mention, I think that that's something that John does really well. And it's something, it's like a good question that I feel like nobody has asked yet, which I'm kind of relieved and kind of surprised is, why is the goofy, toy maker hanging out with John Willis and Nicole?
Well, I think that's a great question.
And the answer is that I really admire John's business. I've admired it for a long time. I was completely unaware of it before like my second Blade show, when the guys who brought me to Blade show to do marketing consulting for them were like, you should check this guy out. I think that you'll like his stuff. And it turns out that John's son was a follower of my channel, and that made for a great introduction. I think he's at military school now, but I'll always be very grateful for that. And talking to John, I was like, I could learn a lot from this guy. And so something that we do at my business is I have all of these machines. We use them to make parts for customers, but we also use them to make parts for us. How do I store all of our screws in specific bins so that my kits go out with exactly what they need to? How do I store the bags that I use to ship things in my shipping department? Because I don't want generic container store shit that I paid $20 for. I want thing that fits exactly size 0 bubble mailers 100 at a time in a sleeve. And once you have machines that can truly, and this is where it starts getting a little romantic or goofy, but like you can make anything with them, you find that like the limiting factor becomes not money or electricity, but your time. And it's like, okay, well, if I ship 1,000 packages a month, then does it make sense for me to make that as efficient as possible, not just for me, but for my guys so that they understand it? And can I prevent error by making things as specific as possible? And so it's like, well, now you can't put the number 2 bag in the number 0 bag spot. And since the number 0 bag is near this thing that fits this thing, it's going to be more difficult for you to muck up the supply chain than to just do it correctly the way that we built it to do it. And that idea comes entirely from how John loads in and out of trade shows. Is I helped John break down his booth one year. I noticed that all of the product went into SOE bags.
Yep.
And then went into an SOE trailer behind a truck that said SOE on it, and it all packed down and in. And I was like, this is brilliant. He didn't pay any money for his most efficient system because he made the system. And then, of course, you start hanging out on the back page and you start going to the shop and stuff, and you see that like the whole business runs that way. The parts go into generic bins, but the way that everything is packed, the way that everything is stored, the way that, material hangs on the shelves, the way that tools get stored, etc. Like John's workbench has a John Willis tray that holds John Willis tools in it. And I'm like, we need to be doing this. Any opportunity we have to use our own stuff, we should be using our own stuff to make our lives easier, to make our lives better. And it makes us faster, which makes us more money. So it definitely makes sense. So when you're like, I could organize my kitchen, it's like, yeah, I mean, you don't think about the seconds a day that you waste being like, where's the cinnamon? Where is my rosemary? Like,
Yep.
It could be outside in a pot, but if it's inside, where is it? And if you put that effort into that personal level of like kind of care and attention, where you're like, this is my system for my stuff in my kitchen, and I don't have to worry about one of the bins from the generic Costco spice rack hanging off the side because my counter was 18 inches and the display counter was 20 or whatever it is. Like in addition to, like I said, you get that kind of feel good every time the Red Bull can slides in and you're like, I made this and it does what I need it to. You also get the sheer efficiency of knowing like, I don't have to worry about if my Red Bull's going to fall over. So now I'm a better driver, or, whatever it is, the seconds add up, and how you spend them is very meaningful. And you can be meaningful about it.
So what have you printed that you were impressed or most impressed or surprised it was doable? That's a good question. It's a hard one, huh?
It is tough because, you go into most of your projects assuming that it's possible. And then the thing that you're surprised by is that it isn't possible half the time. But things that I'm trying to think of any risks that we took that were, I've got one. I 3D printed I'll just start to finish it. So I have a friend, and my friend has a crush on this girl. and he wanted to impress her with something, very meaningful for a very specific anniversary of sorts. And so he came to me and he was like, I really want this thing. And 3D printing lets you start talking in specificities that are insane. So the girl has 2 things in her life that she loves above all other things. And it's the movie How to Train Your Dragon, which is a cartoon movie about people riding on dragons. I know. And it's tea. Not just like drinking tea, but like the entire almost religion around tea ceremonies, how you prepare your tea, how you steep your tea, how you serve your tea, etc. And these 2 things have nothing in common. There is no tea in the How to Train Your Dragon's Viking dragon universe. There's nothing to do with any of that. But he comes to me with this task anyway, a seemingly impossible task. And he's like, I want to make her sterling silver How to Train Your Dragon teaspoons. And I'm like, okay, do you have a vision for that? And he's like, yeah, there's 2 dragons in the movie, and this is what they look like. And you know what a spoon looks like, dipshit, get to work. And I'm like, okay. So we go into CAD. It turns out that, like I said, if you think about it, somebody's done it before. So while nobody has made How to Train Your Dragon spoons or dragon spoons, somebody has modeled both of the dragons. Why somebody modeled the dragons? I have no idea. And frankly, I don't care because it was free. So I ripped the dragon downloads. I cut the heads off the dragons, and then I mounted the heads onto a spoon of my own design because I made these very dainty, very delicate little teaspoons. I put the dragon heads on the back end of each one of the spoons. I was like, all right, great. Now I have a digital model of it. And so I took the digital model and I printed it in wax. Now you can't do the wax via the 3D printing glue gun style, which is the sheer additive, but there is a wax resin. It's like a really hard kind of tacky wax. It's almost like really dried out beeswax, but it comes in a fluid form and then the laser hardens it. So I got these really delicate models off of the laser machine and I'm like, okay, great. And it starts getting into something that everybody's very familiar with, which is I took a negative to make a positive, to make a negative, to make a positive. And it's like, all right, so I've got a digital version. Now I have a positive exact copy of the model in wax. And then I put that in plaster and then I blew out the plaster in a kiln. And so now I have the negative mold. And then I set it up in a vacuum jig and I poured molten silver into it that I melted down half Boolean, half like 90% constitutional slag stuff that didn't look very good in my collection. It was like my really cull stuff that was slicked out. I was like, all right, so, if I weigh this and I weigh this and this is 999 and this is 90%, I don't know what the extra 10% in the coins are. I mean, I do, but I'm like, all right, I've made roughly sterling silver. And then I threw that in the mold and I pulled it out and I was like, this is unbelievable. And so at some point, I mean, I'll show you pictures of them when I got there, but this wound up being from something that was seemingly ridiculous. So this is to satisfy the question of what impressed you the most. When I pulled them out of the plaster and I hit them up with a Dremel polishing wheel for about 30 minutes, the most beautiful, show-stopping, you couldn't believe it, like fulfilled the thing exactly. I want How to Train Your Dragon spoons. Here are 2 only ones like them in the world, absolutely unique. You wanted a meaningful gift for your girl. This is it. Now lie to her and tell her that you made them.
Does he still have her?
Yeah, he does.
Okay.
He's still got the girl, and she uses those spoons every day. And so at least right now, I can honestly tell you that it was time well spent. They're really cool.
That's cool.
And so that it's like, obviously you could make jewelry any other way. You could make those things, you could cut them, sculpt them, whatever, but you would never get the level of precision where it looks like it came out of the movie onto the spoon without doing a full design studio, effectively doing the same thing that we were doing, but you do a clay sculpt, and then from the clay sculpt, you'd go negative to positive wax, et cetera, and so forth. And so without effectively a dental lab of, stone and alginate, it's just another tool that you can kind of add to your repertoire so that you can do stuff sometimes that you never thought was possible. I mean, you can use it for screen printing. You can 3D print your layout instead of building the screen. You can just drop it on. You can use it for guide if you're going to be doing molding on wood. We've done that before. We just built a big replica of the Millennium Falcon door for reasons that I can't get into. But we 3D printed effectively the puffy jig that goes all around in an orbital of the circular door thing. And so it's little stuff, right? Like nobody looked at that and said to me, they were like, hey man, it seems like these are all perfectly one-to-one copies of one another. But, you know, without them ever saying that, they saw it and it looked really good because they were all one-to-one copies of one another, as opposed to like, and so that's the difference between like, you know, did a professional designer build this versus like, did a high school set designer build this? And it just make feet make yards. So
were you just out in California?
I was, yeah. I just flew back yesterday.
Can you say what you were doing out there? Or
yeah, I can say part of what I was doing. I spent 9 days setting up and breaking down Star Wars Celebration. So that's the big annual thing. They put it off for 2 years due to the pandemic. The next one's going to be in London next year. But they debuted the new Obi-Wan series. They had massive talent out there. I mean, Harrison Ford was there, which was incredible. It was a really cool show. But to accompany the show, the convention center put together a lot of displays, put together a lot of fan-made displays, set up a lot of infrastructure specifically to make that convention center feel like a true, you know, this is the only place in the world like it right now, Star Wars experience. And I got to help with that and participate at a level that not a lot of people get to see, and that was really, really cool.
Was Adam Savage out there?
Pardon?
Did you see Adam Savage out there?
No, he usually does San Diego Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con. But a buddy of mine actually was just on Jimmy Kimmel Live for a 3D printed Nerf ball shooter thing. And if you look on Adam Savage's Instagram, Jimmy Kimmel ended up loaning Adam Savage the Nerf ball shooter that we designed. And so Adam Savage is messing with that. And my hobby, my world of like foam flinging goofballs, is losing their mind that Adam Savage is playing with something that we made, and he's grinning ear to ear while he's doing it, which is pretty cool.
So you met my video guy, Brandel.
I do like Brandel, yeah.
So Brandel was doing a video shoot for a super high-end tattoo studio in this abandoned building, or supposedly abandoned building in Nashville. Gotcha. And they're up on the second level to do this shoot, and they walk up there, and there are giant stormtroopers and shit up there, like bunches of them.
Sure.
Like a whole set almost. And somebody went back to see about acquiring them, and it was all just gone, right? So it was a trip. They were just there. Nobody knew what they were doing there. There was obviously a lot of money put into these things. They were set like looking out the windows, and like,
oh yeah,
you were there, you knew they were there.
You know, if you're at the right soundstage at the right time, you can see some unbelievable shit. It's pretty cool. Yeah, Brandel's work tends to be pretty impressive, and I'm surprised he hasn't gotten into trouble with some of the places that he's gone and shot and some of the stuff that he's captured. Like, I don't know. I'm sure it was all digital. I would never want to get him in trouble.
No, he's shooting tons of work for, you know, businesses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I want to back up to something we were talking about before we went live, where you said in passing you need to be careful. You know, when you're a kid choosing your first internet username, if you end up being a YouTube sensation, then you have it. So, can you tell us a little bit about your journey of going from zero to popular on YouTube? Because I'm sure a lot of people watching this are interested in how that happened.
How do you have 1 million views on some of your videos?
I do. Yeah, I have multiple. I think I would be surprised. I think I have something like 700 million views across my YouTube channel. If you add it, we're close to 1 billion across all platforms. The YouTube channel is pretty successful with just over 750,000 subscribers. I mean, it's and then I'm not as active on other platforms. And the reason that I'm a bad person to answer this question is that it was in my case truly very accidental. I did not necessarily seek this out or ask for this. I know that it's a very popular job trajectory, that there's lots of kids in middle school and high school now that they want to be, you know, influencers or YouTubers or, you know, TikTok stars or something along that line. not to date myself, but when I was in middle and high school, that wasn't a job. That wasn't an option. Like, you weren't looking at the internet as a thing to achieve something on. It was more of a resource that you could use academically. So I created my internet content with the explicit purpose of tutorial videos. That's what kind of launched me to fame, if you want to call it that, internet fame, for whatever that's worth. And the tutorial videos were actually entirely anonymous for the longest time. I would cut all of my cameras at my head. So it was just like hands, shoulders, chest. And then a ton of it was POV. I would wear these snowboarder video goggles, and I would film whatever my hands were doing, taking things apart, putting things together, soldering, circuiting, stuff like that to that effect. And so it just turned out that there were a lot of people who either wanted to do that or wanted to watch somebody do that. Maybe I was into the ASMR thing before it became a thing, where people just liked the idea of, like, tools clicking and clacking and, plastic creaking and opening. It wasn't until I think 2016 that I eventually started making public appearances. I started doing bigger events, and I was like, all right, I guess I have a face now. Goodbye anonymity. This sucks. And so I started shooting more this frame or standing and talking about things, and I found that I got to be pretty dynamic doing that. Again, my background is in engineering. I am not video inclined at all. I'm not even necessarily, I would consider, a very content creative person. The stuff that Brandel does makes my stuff look like Christmas home video shot by dad. I'm not a very talented video maker, but I find that the information has merit sort of in and of itself. And that's what was, disseminated and shared when I was, quote unquote, coming up. That, you wake up one day and you're like, oh, wow, 1,000 people saw this video. That's pretty cool. I guess I helped 1,000 people. And then it's like, oh, okay, now 10,000 people saw the video. How many people saw the video? We should start making better videos. How many people are going to see the video? And so, I think that we got very lucky. I think that I hit, a lot of beats at the right time. I think that, a lot of the things that I'm interested in, the internet's interested in. I think that, a lot of the blasters that I were building, the toys that I was building at the time that I was building them were for a zombie game, right around the time that, like, Walking Dead was the hottest property on the planet. And so, like, that definitely helped. And before I knew it, I was like, getting recognized at the movie theater and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, okay. So, like, and those interactions can be as innocent as, like, my kid likes your stuff. Can you take a picture with him? And then they can be as meaningful as, like, my mother's lamp hasn't worked in 40 years and my 13-year-old son just fixed it. And when I asked him how he did it, it was because he watched your video. And I'm like, I don't have a lamp video. And then I'm like, oh, but right. Like, if you teach somebody how to recircuit, a battery tray for a Nerf gun, that is effectively how you rewire a circuit to light a bulb. And so, then you have 50-year-old women just crying to you. And that feels amazing because, like, who knows if that kid in that school system would have necessarily gotten, electrical 101 without the power of the internet or free content or it being tied to a hobby that he loved based on a toy that he plays with. And so you never really get to anticipate it. I think that more than anything, my fame benefits from just being there kind of at the beginning and sticking with it. I think that consistency is far more important than anything else. I've launched a video at least every week for the last 10 years. I'm one of, the beta YouTube users because I needed a way to upload school projects back in the day and I couldn't afford a flash drive. So I've just been around, and if you're around long enough, like, people appreciate that. I think that that's one of the tenets of sort of Willisisms, so to speak, is every morning there's a video that's like, what are you doing today? Do you give a shit about it? You should do it. If you're not doing it, somebody else will. And so, like, it's as important as it is to do that once, like, it's so much more meaningful to do it all the time. Like, how you do one thing is how you do everything. Showing up is half the battle. 95% of people don't even go to the gym. So, like, I'd rather be a fat guy at the gym than anybody else. Like,
where do you?
It's funny because You say it happened accidentally, and then you just described a 10-year journey of discipline and consistency and sharing relevant information.
That's the foundation of that pyramid, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the top looks like if it doesn't stay at the top.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and again, that's sort of the part that surprises people is when they, when people become my friend, truly, everybody expects kind of like YouTuber, me, vlogging all the time, Instagram guy, because that's who goes to VidCon, and that's what YouTuber represents in our society. And that's what I think a lot of kids want to be. And it's like, I am 100% a YouTuber second. I have always been a YouTuber second. When I started being a YouTuber, I was a student first. And like student was more important to me than YouTube. And then I became a small business owner. And now I consult and design. And like that's, so much more meaningful for me because people will see things like John mentioned. I posted a few things on my Instagram because I was like, behind the scenes at Star Wars Celebration. And I'll get kids that'll DM me and they'll be like, how many subscribers do I have to be at Star Wars Celebration? And I have to tell them, I'm like, bro, there's no YouTubers back here. This is not a YouTuber thing. This is a works with Imagineers on a monthly basis thing. Like this is the skill that you build is far more important than how you, display it or promote it or anything like that. I mean, there's a lot of people like, I guess we could pick a macro example, right? Like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is not famous because he's famous. He's famous because he's a very diligent, a very driven, a very motivated businessman, performer, entertainer. Like, and everybody, like John said, you want to look at the top and be like, I want that. How do I get that? And nobody wants to talk about like Dwayne had a pretty hard career coming up. Like,
yeah.
Well, nobody ever wants to hear that part.
Where are you right now? You're in the Atlanta area?
No, so this is I have a small workshop in Florida that I do prototyping at that's very close to Disney. So I flew from Celebration here, and like I'm almost embarrassed by how much of a mess it is. Like you can see there's like, laser panels and a Dremel on the floor and stuff like this.
So is your entire crew in Florida now?
Not all of us. I brought my, when I slid over, the desk started going up and down. So I brought my two primary guys with me to Anaheim, and they're with me now here today. And then we're driving back to my primary facility is right outside of Atlanta. It's not as close to Disney. So we're gonna break this down after this live stream tonight. We're gonna get packed into that sweet Subaru Outback, and we're gonna throw 500 miles. We'll get in sometime tonight, and then we're gonna do an honest week's work of some design building, make sure that all the web orders are going out. So like half my team is in Georgia right now. We're gonna hook up with them. We're gonna crank out what would be considered a normal week for us, and then I'm going to leave them to their own vices, and I'm going to come hang out with you for a weekend.
Are you relocating? Is there a move going to happen or anything?
There is, but it's not public, so I can't talk about it.
Okay, that's where I was going. Okay.
Yes, sir. There's some pieces in motion right now.
I want to tell people like what the reality of this is, right? They're seeing this, but it's this.
Right.
And I want to spill the beans and be like, what implies that? How did that happen? Right?
Such an exciting story there, and I'm excited to tell it too. And I've told a few people, including yourself, that like there's some really exciting stuff happening just kind of in my world, life, business. I also think that it's a little myopic and selfish to be like, let's talk about me, John. But also, the primary reason that it's still a secret is I find that he who moves in darkness and surprises people gets a lot more done than he who's like, I'm doing this thing.
Yeah, not only that, you have your detractors try to derail that, especially when money's involved. Or even when they stand nothing to gain, they are more than happy to derail you. Pierre's on here, and he had asked, what other materials have you printed in other than just normal resin and stuff?
Like if you've seen a 3D printing material, I've at least played with it. I've printed sterling silver powder and PLA as a composite. That was really exciting for a jewelry project, but it didn't work the way that I really wanted to. I've done virtually every kind of metal in different nylon composites with the hope of I could dry brush them differently. John mentioned earlier that I've done just about every percentage of sawdust that I could get away with in plastic to figure out what would take wood stain the best and make some really cool features out of that. I've done a copper composite that was specifically designed to make something that would be electrically conductive. And then I also wanted to see if I pumped enough electricity into it, if I could get it to like heat and glow. And you can, but then the fact that you're heating plastic gets a little dicey. I've done all of the different resins. I've played with dental resins, which I've used for, a variety of different molding and sculpting things. I've done the tough resins, the translucent resins. I've done the clear resin that looks like ice specifically so that I could embed light into it. So I could put EL strips and wires in there. I'm messing with a new material right now that I think is really, really cool, and it has nothing to do with 3D printing, but I can't stop talking about it. When you go to Home Depot and you look at the Edison bulbs and you're like, those are really expensive light bulbs. Like, why are they so expensive? It turns out that they're not even really light bulbs. They're LED strips made to look like light bulbs. And the inside, the filament in there doesn't have, I guess, a technical or a colloquial name yet. But that filament is effectively a flexible strand of LEDs that are so tight. I posted a sneak peek of it on my Instagram a while ago, but I'm working with a supplier in Shenzhen right now to try and get a supply of them in, because I think that cosplayers are going to go nuts when they figure out that instead of using like automotive lighting strips, they could be using this stuff that's way brighter, way lower voltage. Like, it's really cool, and it's super flexible. So like, I'm making a flashbang grenade from like Call of Duty that uses this wiring to simulate and it's bright enough that if I cover it in like a almost cotton ball material, it diffuses it in such a way. It's pretty cool. So there's there's always something kind of interesting going on over here. We pull a lot of inspiration from different properties. We do a few things that are entirely homebrewed. But like I said, 3D printing is really cool. It lets you solve a lot of problems that you might not even think of as problems right now. And once you kind of acquire not just the machine, but also the knowledge, and you know more about what you could do with it, you can add it to other processes and create like some really dynamic, unique things.
How do you monetize that? Like, what's paying the bills out of that?
I guess which part? So I had to explain to my partner's father a few years ago. I had to be like, because you get to that point where eventually he's like, all right, how serious are you? And you're like, I'm pretty serious. And he's basically just like, okay, what do you do? And that is a difficult question for me to ask or to answer, because I have kind of a different answer depending on who you are. Like, if you want to be my friend, I have a pretty generic answer of like, I make stuff. It's fun. If you want to work with me, I have a consultant answer, which is I can tell you how what I do makes you more money effectively. I can design you something that's better than your competition. I can design you something that's cheaper than how you make it right now. Or I can improve your design process in such a way that you won't have to pay as many people, whatever that is. And so like, that's a big part of what pays my bills is the corporate level toy industry consulting. And then, how does the fun stuff pay the bills? Well, content about the fun stuff tends to do pretty well. The opportunities that the fun stuff kind of opens up for consulting, where it's like, why would you hire me when you have 5 guys? Well, did your 5 guys make this? Be pretty cool. The flexibility that it offers us in terms of like, we can make one thing one week and another thing the other, as opposed to, a standard machine shop. Like the guys who we do Scudo with, they make the wallets. They also make sight adjusters for rifles, and they make performance shifters for Mustangs, Camaros, Corvettes, pretty much any American performance car. That's MGW over in Augusta, Georgia. I always have to remind myself that it's Augusta, not Disgusta, because we call it that instead. It's a far leaner operation with additive than reductive. You don't have to make necessarily vices and jigs for everything. And ironically, you can 3D print a lot of the vices and jigs that help supplement the reductive manufacturing process. A hard part of doing this is making the jig that holds the aluminum billet so that you can machine out the lid. What if you just printed an exact sleeve that holds the billet? But there's I guess the answer that I gave my partner's father is I was like, I can afford it. If at any point you think that I'm not making enough money to support your daughter, I will make more money. So that's like I said, it's four faceted. The web store does very well. The YouTube channel does very well. The consulting does very well. And then we run some pretty large events within kind of our world and our hobby. And those aren't profitable, but because they're so large and so impactful to so many people, they make everything else far more profitable. Now, when you go and you kind of explain to partners like, oh, this is what we're doing. Like I'm wearing a tournament for a jersey right now that has, sponsors involved that have elevated kind of Nerf guns into a paintball-esque sport. This is my referee jersey. And it just, after a whirlwind 9 days in California, this was the only clean thing in the workshop that I could throw on for this.
So can we call them, we can't call them Nerf guns because Nerf is a registered trademark. So we call them blasters.
Yep.
So for people watching, think Nerf gun basically, but not made by Nerf. What is the most expensive blaster out there that you've ever seen?
So the most expensive blasters in the hobby are usually the ones that I sell that are more art than they are hobby blaster. But I mean, I've sold blasters for as much as $2,000-$3,000 in the past. Those tend to have like sick hydrographics jobs, integrated LED work so that they flash or make noise or something to that effect. And then there's always a discerning kind of customer that what they really want to buy is they want to buy something that they know is incredibly high quality and that nobody else can have. And so the one-offs tend to be very expensive. John knows that better than anybody. Who doesn't want a custom, one-of-one John Willis belt, backpack, wallet, etc. But the ones that I sell on like a daily basis that tend to be pretty pricey are like everywhere from $300 to $500-$600. And those are You have a $500 Talon Claw. You have a fully 3D printed John Willis colors spring powered blaster. So with no electronics, it winds up being a little bit cheaper, but it has machined parts in it that we designed. I mean, it's a pretty sharp thing. And if you were to take it to like a 9-10-year-old birthday party that was a Nerf blaster battle, they would fear you pretty quickly as you can shoot,
or the lobby of a hotel in a Ruth Chris with 200 people and James Yeager shooting dudes with this Nerf gun. So what we're talking about is a Nerf gun, a gun that's 3D printed with metal springs and it's all kinds of it's damn near like it's neat. It's built like a gun, shoots Nerf darts, super accurate to probably 60 feet at 300 feet a second. Like you get hit with it, you're hit with it. I show the guys are like, what is that thing? I'm like, oh, that's a $1,600 Nerf gun. Never do they go, what are you doing with a $1,600 Nerf gun?
John, you also have a mounted fantasy, like you have what is it called? You have the thing that Luke Skywalker sleeps in mounted on your wall.
A Tauntaun.
Yeah, you have a Tauntaun mounted on your wall. There's nothing in your workshop.
There might be a giraffe or two around too.
I own 7 giraffes. But the deal is nobody ever goes, oh, that's ridiculous. They always go, every single time they go, where can I get this?
Yeah.
So, I mean, clearly you could sell as many of these things as you could make.
Which, is more or less where we're at. The web store is limited right now by the number of printers and electricity we have. I have 3 guys who are full-time staff that just manage the web store. I don't want to say for me. I do a lot of stuff on the web store, but, frequently I'm disappearing off to other states for a week at a time. And so the fact that is seamless, I'm very grateful for their work, making it so that the web store never goes down or takes breaks. That's pretty exciting. I could 3D print an airsoft gun. I know that there are a lot of 3D printed accessories for airsoft guns. They use metal gearboxes for the AEGs, which are the automatic electronic guns. That's the most popular airsoft guns. And so you can effectively skin that box with whatever, but the amount of torque on the gears requires them to be metal gears. So you really don't want to print anything that would be susceptible to those stresses of torsion, because it would just warp and then you'd be kind of grinding it out. You'd almost be taking a Dremel to the 3D printed parts by virtue of the gearbox. So You could, but it hasn't really hit that that hobby just as much yet. And if I wanted to be really, really snarky about it, I could say that it's because airsofters aren't as smart as nerfers, so they don't appreciate the nature of making something themselves. They'd rather just sort of throw money at it.
Here's another question. Waste stream management. What about recycling the pieces you cut off?
Yes. All right. So
you knew that was coming, right?
So I want to really bad. Effectively, there are multiple companies selling machines where you take your bad prints, your broken prints, or your crushed up milk jugs, right? Which I don't think are PLA, but are a thermoplastic. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you take them, and there's two parts. One of them is a grinder that just turns them into effectively pellets. And then the other one is an extruder. And what it does is it melts in a giant coil and extrudes the plastic onto a spool that's spinning. And so effectively, like you said, it closes the loop. For not a zero waste system, but a pretty negligible waste system, you wind up with a pretty hideous brown spool at the end of it, unless you were being very meaningful about it and adding like, color additives or glitter or whatever. But you, in that way, you do close the loop. You have a spool that you made of plastic that you can feed back into the computer controlled hot glue gun style machine. And in doing that, you have like a really great prototyping kind of role that you can use for dimensional accuracy, or you can make B grade parts that you can sell. I know that we sell a lot of B grade parts. If I pull it off the printer and I'm like, this is fine, but I don't like how, it's got a stripe here where maybe it over extruded for 5 minutes. I'll be like, all right, that's 10% off. And people buy those all the time off the web store. In fact, I have some people who will wait for the 20% off, 30% off B grade sale to buy their stuff, because dimensionally it's still functional and that's all they care about. The resin machines are already a zero waste system, because if I pull it out and show you the tray that the resin sits in, right? The resin itself just sort of sits in here as like a soup. And the only part that gets used is the part that's activated by the laser. So the rest of it just sits in the vat and is ready to go, and it adds more to it if it needs more volume. But
how much does that unit right there cost?
This is what's called a Form 3L, and with as much humility as I can muster standing in front of two of them, they're a $10,000 system each. Now that comes with, there's a big vat down here full of alcohol that we clean the parts off in. And then this is a microwave that's large enough to bake in a UV oven the parts so that they're fully cured. Now, admittedly, this workshop is in Florida. Florida is sunny all the time. So if the parts are really big, I don't want to fool with the microwave. I just set them outside, and there's plenty of UV out there. I don't know if you can still see, I got sunburned recently. Thought I had more hair than I did.
That happens.
Yeah. I've been told that eventually you run out.
Yeah, that's what they tell us all.
But there are a few different machines in here. Over here is a Mark Forged machine, which costs, I think, about $6,000. And then the ones that I recommend, like the real workhorses of the operation, there's 5 Prusa Minis down there. And then a Creality up there. The Prusa Minis are $500 each, effectively all in, and the Creality was only $1,000. So
are you moving all these machines to Atlanta then after this?
No. So this workshop, I effectively have duplicates of these machines. Okay. I currently am working out of 2 workshops, one down here, one in Atlanta.
Yeah, you said you were packing up, and I was just thinking my heartburn would be what happens to those machines in the car.
They transport really well.
Do they?
Which I'll prove to you when I bring one up to Tennessee.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, a lot of them, they ship in crates. And so that kind of leads you to believe like, oh man, these things are going to be a bear to ship. But as long as you pull the resin out and toss the resin, it's just a computer that has motors attached to it. So you could throw it. I wouldn't put it in the bed of a truck, but if you have a panel van, which is how we do move them, it's really easy. Usually we just use the Outback. The Outback hauls a lot of stuff.
He loves him in Outback. That's what I'm hearing right now.
I hated it for the longest time. And
hang on a second, guys. Alpha Omega. I don't know who you are, but if you're going to use our audience here to do whatever it is you're doing. Add something of value here and have something of content online with what we're talking about. Otherwise, remove yourself or you will not post here ever again.
I removed them from this feed already. Yep.
Oh, well. Maybe they wanted us to buy Twitch followers. How else will we get them?
Yeah. So what platform you're on? You're on TikTok. I've seen you there.
I do.
You were doing it before I ever even did any of them.
I want to be very clear. I have finally reached the point in my creator cycle where I recognize my own limitations. I hired a 22-year-old girl to run my TikTok.
But you're in them. I mean, is she just
yeah, once a month she comes by and I give her 3 hours and she films me for 3 hours doing various things and she staggers them out over the course of the month. If something really exciting happens that can't wait, I'll film it vertical and I'll send it to her and she'll synthesize it and upload it.
So is she filming that on a camera?
Yep.
She's good, man. Like, I thought you were doing that. I'm like, I need to hire you.
No, you should hire her. The trick to TikTok is to hire a Zoomer to do it. They understand the interface and they're on their phone all the time anyway, so they catch the trends. I mean, she consumes a lot of TikTok, so frequently the way that 3 hour block looks like at the beginning of the month, and I've got, I think 4 days from now she'll be by and we'll be filming this month's TikToks. What it looks like is she shows up, she's got a sheet, and she's like, "Hey, these are the most trending audios. These are the things that I think that you should do for some of those audios. I know that you want to do 2 with your dog, so here's a couple of sad dog videos that we can do. And beyond that, like, what new toys do you have, or blasters or machines do you have?" And usually that's good for 15, 16 videos, which we bang out in 3 hours. And then I pay her and she leaves. It's great. The TikTok content pays her.
How do we shop that person? Like, how do we find one of her?
So I'm really lucky in that I run this nonprofit. The nonprofit is full of smart people. Smart people have younger siblings, have siblings who are just now in college, have siblings who need internships. Sometimes those people need internships. Sometimes they've got children that just want something to do on the weekends. And I have an infinite amount of 3D printers that need parts pulled off of them and buttons pressed. So in this case, she's the younger sister of my one of my designers. One of the guys who does the actual digital modeling of things that I need for the business. I think that in your case, you have plenty of employees who have children who have TikToks, and just, if they're good at it, for them, If they're not good at it, then don't do that. But if they're good at running their own TikTok, I find it when you're like, "Hey, you want $300?" They'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I could be great at doing this for $300. Like,
yeah, I do need some social media, some dedicated social media people for sure.
I think maybe if you put it out on your channels, some of your people who listen to you have children.
Yeah, maybe
that job could be done entirely remotely. But I know you, and I know how your workflow works, and I've modeled my own after it in some ways. The hardest part for you about having someone manage your socials is that you, by virtue of living and working and how you live your life, create a lot of content. But you are so busy creating the content that you don't have time to capture the content.
We've got a video guy in house. He doesn't film though. I need a videographer.
Right.
Our video dude is awesome that we're running right now. Sure. Like, Austin's great, but we need a guy that, is there with the camera.
Right. The advantage of kind of the all-in-one is that they capture the content. They kind of understand the content. They'll never understand it as much as you do, but they don't have to, right? Then they made it to the medium and then they launch it. And I'm really good at doing that on YouTube. I've completely given up on trying to monetize my Instagram in any meaningful way. I use it kind of to keep up with my friends. And it happens that I just do enough ridiculous shit that people like watching my Instagram content anyway. And then the TikTok is, like I said, it's outsourced, but it's still me. I make the content. I just don't synthesize, cut, and produce it, which in my opinion is worth its weight in gold. I think that it's very meaningful with my audience being as young as it is to be on TikTok. I think that I should have done it a year before when I actually did it. But eventually I connected the dots and I was like, I don't have time to do this myself. I definitely don't have time on a daily basis to do this myself, but I absolutely have time for an appointment monthly to do this.
Yeah.
And so that that was a tough realization as a content creator to be like, I can't do all of this. But once I did it, it was a terrific relief. I love knowing that I am active on TikTok. You know, she's very good. She's very professional. She responds to comments, you know, in a very professional, polite manner. She deletes the mean comments so that I never have to see them. And she does a really good job. We haven't gotten any brand deals necessarily on TikTok, but like, I'm not a brand deal guy. I'm a lot like you in that, like, the primary thing that I'm advertising is I want to advertise my events. I want to advertise my product. I want to advertise my services. So I don't need, you know, to be selling somebody else's socks. And in fact, I find that any brand promoting I do is very genuine, very organic. I like wearing SOE shirts. I like wearing SOE belts. I'm wearing Katanica pants right now. And that way, when people are like, what's that? I'm like, oh, if you make things, you should wear these pants. Why? Because a guy who makes things 12 hours a day told me to buy these pants.
Yeah. Yeah. We're so throttled back on social media. We have no monetization. Like, we're putting 5 videos a day up. We're getting 200 views. We go live and Amanda posts a link that people click on. They're like, we couldn't even find the video.
Yeah.
I think you're very stifled. I think that it happened to you around the same time that it happened to Jaeger. I think that platforms could do a better job of being honest about how they push content creators stuff to their audiences. I think that YouTube just showing people like, this is your funnel isn't meaningful when I don't understand, like, okay, like, because I see it too. It's similar but different, and it's not quite as painful because my reach is still very meaningful in those platforms. But like, you make good content and it reaches 200 people, which is insane when you look at your audience and your actual impact. I have 700 and something thousand subscribers. My frequent reach for a video in terms of what YouTube pushes it to is like, they'll push it to 80, 100,000 people. And I have to keep doing it because occasionally YouTube will just decide to push it to my whole audience. And I'll get, you know, 1 million impressions on something. But, you know, I mean, these days videos top out at like 50,000 views, which is still, and I don't want to sound like I'm whining or, oh, boo-hoo. Like, 50,000 views is a lot. You can run a lot of business on 50,000 views. But it's a little hurtful when I'm like, it should be at least 500,000 views, though.
Yeah, we have 700,000 on Facebook, and our reach is nothing. We've got 26,000 on YouTube, but I've had 25,000 for near 10 years now.
Right.
But so it's just consistency, actionable and valuable, right? So we just constantly put out value in the hopes that somebody gains something and then shares it, and we gain a new set of eyes in that manner. And so we have to run it off platform, you know?
I think you do a terrific job of that. I think that you're really good at capturing people through people. Like, the people who like your message and like your stuff are very inclined. Like I was saying earlier, I was like, people recognize me at Disney for my YouTube channel. And as often as people recognize me for my YouTube channel at Disney, people will be like, is that an SOE shirt? And I'll be like, yeah, it's pretty cool. So it's definitely a meaningful way to do it, but I understand that there's kind of some sting because of, you know, sometimes what the content is, or sometimes, you know, the way that the entire channel has been categorized, your reach gets cut pretty hard.
Yeah, I look at it this way. Attention is money it's like money people spend when they give you your time on something like a live stream. We've got 650 people willing to go all the way out to Boondock, Camden, Tennessee, and be in person for days.
It is
he puts out a video and only 200 people are going to look at the video. That's not right. That's not a reflection of reality.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. My large invitationals draw a significant amount of people, but then the Facebook event for that, when I want to post an update, reaches like, it's insane that you can have 1,000 people who flew across the country to be at your college campus to do your event. And when you post an update on Sunday morning for them to tell them what you need to tell them, it only reaches 200 of their Facebook accounts. I'm like, I hope you're staying in a hotel room with somebody who got this.
Jeez.
I'm like, how is it better for me to have walkie-talkies to communicate with my staff? Like,
it is.
So we do.
We do too.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing. We maintain the email list. We've got about 75,000 email I think we're close to 3,000 on text. And now, as far as sales go, when we push out a text, we sell out. Like, we don't even need to maintain an email list. We just maintain the email list so that we have access for other stuff, right? We throw a party with 900 people and we get people from 23 countries come here.
Yeah.
It's insane. But we can't communicate through social media on a daily basis with them.
Which is what it's for.
You both respectively achieved whatever your 100,000 true fans are. And in that way,
or
like
1,000 true fans. Even.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's all it really takes to be exponential sometimes, which is I think what we kind of have to settle for on the internet from time to time. I'm very much looking forward to meeting more people. I came to the last SOE party, but in true Drac fashion, I was there when I could be there, which was a little late. And then it was interesting being a little late. I got to talk to all the people that I wanted to talk to. I think that was a pretty good crowd, but I'm excited to be on time for this one and meet everyone. That'll be exciting.
I'm sure people are going to be excited to meet you too.
Plus, I'll have a robot. Even if you don't like goofy toy guys, I have
robots
a robot.
Are pretty cool.
Like,
okay, I got a question for you, John. I think this is for you. Or is it? I don't know who this is for. Will you make more scabbard rigs? Is that you?
So tell them what a scabbard is.
It's kind of for both of us. So
yeah.
I think Carrie has one of these, truth be told. But it's this. Yeah, it's one of these. So
there's a number of these that are wrong.
There's a few error scabbard rigs.
Yeah.
So these only hold 1 mag per cell, which means they'll also hold MP5 mags, real mags.
Yep.
And then the real rig held doubles. So I didn't realize it where there was my math was off,
right.
And a bunch of these got made, but not what we needed. So I happen to have one. That's why I have it here on the table here. This was the second batch that we had done, different color scheme.
The story for these is really cool because it upset some people, and stories that upset people are always fantastic. And this one upset a lot of different categories of people, which was really exciting. But when I met John forever ago, he gave me a micro rig, and I've used it for its intended purpose. It barely fits me. I'm a pretty scrawny guy, but I eventually grew into it and got to use it. I've used it for its real steel applications. I've used it for airsoft, incidentally, and it had some Nerf application, but I do competitive Nerfing events. I do kind of long Nerfing events that last an order of like 8 hours, which are more scenario based. And I was always really, really upset and disappointed by the quality of gear that we had in my team, that I had personally, and kind of enjoying the position that I do in my hobby of relative influence. I could usually get something custom made, but it was never exactly what I wanted because it would be made by somebody who's another college guy or something like that. And I mean, it's a rare opportunity to be introduced to somebody and then become friends with somebody who is truly unequivocally the best at what they do.
You were wearing chainmail when I met you.
I was wearing chainmail.
You kind of stood out.
Like, if you can't be good at something, be memorable.
That's a good point.
So I meet John, and I think like within the first time I met him, I was like, all right, I really want this Nerf thing. And John gets that 100 times a Blade show. If somebody comes up and they're like, I have this pistol and I run it this way and I want this thing. And the unfortunate reality of just being John is that when you are the best in the world at what you do, you can't do that for everybody all the time. Custom is expensive. And John has customers that, are of that level or have been friends with him for 25 years. And I've seen him make incredible custom things for them. And I was like, I really want this thing. And John was like, yeah, okay. No. And so the next year I was
Did I say that?
You listened, you heard me out the first time I described a scabbard rig to you. And I was like, I want a thing that sits on my dominant hand side that holds my magazines exactly like this, but I want it to, because the issue that I've had with everything in the past is that it didn't really fit. It didn't fit me, and it didn't fit Nerf proprietary stuff. And so I was like, that's what I want. Clearly you understand fit and finish. That's what I want. And you were like, sounds cool. Can't do it. Sorry. I was like, okay, well, I swing and miss all the time, whatever. And then the next year I saw you again and we were talking and you remembered me and I listened to you talk to a bunch of other people, which I really enjoyed. And then I brought it up again. I was like, I really want this thing, like, and clearly you could make this thing. And I might have even expressed more of the frustrations with it of being like, I've tried MP5 subloads. I've tried chest rigs that hold like, I can triple stack them this way, but it's always loose. It's always rattly. They'll fall out. I'm like, I don't want good enough. I really want great. And I travel the entire world doing this. And I think that me having great could be good for both of us. And you were like, yeah, okay. Like we could make that, but no. And then I sent you a message like somewhere after that, because that was 2 in person asking and describing. And you were like, listen, if you come by, maybe we'll make it. And I was like, okay. And I remember the really funny part is I spent like 6 months being like, is now a good time? What are you doing this Friday? And then there was one time that I was driving from Canada to Georgia and I was kind of passing by and I was like, does this work? And you, either because of your quirks and idiosyncrasies or because maybe I like to believe it was a test. You wouldn't reply. Or if you did reply, it would be a week later just because you were that fucking busy. And so I was like, all right. I mean, he kind of said that I could just come. So one day I woke up at like 4 in.the.morning because that's what it takes to get to Tennessee at like 10 in.the.morning. And I woke up and I told my staff, I was like, hey, I'm not going to be in today. I'm going to Tennessee. And they were like, what? I'm like, I'm going to Tennessee to a compound in the middle of nowhere at an address that only I know to visit a man that I've met twice that everyone across the internet agrees is a crazy person. See?
I kind of like Howard Hughes.
This is great.
I try to go with Howard Hughes.
Yeah. So I show up, and it's the funniest thing because I did send off a message because I was tired of sending the "Are you free? Does this work for you? When is a good time?" messages. And so I finally did what I guess John had been waiting for me to do, and I sent him a message. I was like, "I'm gonna be there tomorrow morning." I drove up. I found it. It was open. I parked. There was nobody else there that day other than John and his staff. I walk in. Pierre's there. And I kick open the front door and Pierre's like, oh, John's waiting for you, dude. And I'm like, oh, I walk over. John's busy. I wait like 20 minutes. I talk with John for 20 minutes while he finishes up what he's doing. And so John, for the first time after me describing it twice, is like, okay, what are we making? I'm like, well, here's the thing. This is what I wanted to do. These are the magazines. I've described it. This is what I want. John's like, okay. And it's really, in any instance where you ever, so like watching people, I grew up partially in Greece. So watching people make phyllo dough, like not a machine, but like people make phyllo dough is a magical experience because very few people do it. Even fewer do it the old way. And it's really technically impressive because similar to watching John work, you don't really measure. There's no rule or right. It's like, John slapped the magazines on the material. He was like, okay. He took a Sharpie, click, 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 scissors, machine, sewing. And I want to say within about an hour and a half, 2 hours, we had the first prototype. And the first prototype is so good that it's still to date the one that I use. It's the only one that has the label on the outside, but he threw the label on at the end because I wanted it to be on the outside. I don't want to sell them to children with the label on the outside. That's like a fun Easter egg for them to find. But so we made them in Cryptek with red because that's my favorite thing. I love Cryptek. I like Raid, and then I like Typhon. Typhon's probably my favorite. So the first ones were Typhon with red thread because those are my colors, black and red. We got the prototype done, and I was like, all right, great. I love it. And John, I think originally was like, this is just for you. Like, you've been asking for this forever. You want this. This is a thing for you. And so I was like, John, how much money do I owe you? And he was like, none, because you came up here and we hung out. And you finally have the thing. So maybe I'll just stop hearing about it, if nothing else. I was like, oh, no. Like, this is an amazing thing. And the prototype is so good that I can wear it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell people about it. And then I want to sell them. And John was like, and so I told him, I was like, listen, it probably won't be that many. I'll run a Kickstarter and all you have to do is make the number for the Kickstarter. And I should have known that this would be a bigger problem than I thought it was going to be at the time. But not unlike most small business owners, I'm so focused on what I want to do that I figure out the steps in between along the way. And so I'm like, okay, I've already built the Kickstarter. I took the prototype. I made the videos. I showed people that in a world where we're all using, I guess, the next best thing, or the airsoft, or the real steel equivalent, I'm like, this is the first instance of professionally made tactical gear for us. And they ate it up. The Kickstarter blew up. I want to say it did like $10,000, which is very large for a hobbyist Kickstarter for me.
I think it did that like overnight, Drac.
It did, yeah. It did 10, and then it might have worked its way up to like 13 or 14 by the end of the run. And so I sent John a message, and I was like, hey, I ran the Kickstarter. I need like 80 of these things. And John was like, yeah, okay. And it wasn't until like right around Christmas that I came up. I brought a bunch of toys for Jaeger's toy drive because I get a lot of samples, and I had a bunch of stuff to donate. And John was like, all right, we finished them. And I ended up getting them to kids in time for the holiday that ordered them on the Kickstarter. And as many kids as there were a lot of adult kids that ordered them. And I was like, okay, great. I did it. My job is done. I have convinced the best person at making tactical gear to make me the tactical gear that I wanted. And then I shared it with my hobby. Excellent. On to the next thing. And then the email started, which were, hey man, I didn't have any money back in July, but I really wanted one. Do you have any left? And I'm like, no, I don't have any left. John only made enough for the Kickstarter. Hey man, I really want one. And my buddy's got one at my local group. And, you know, where can I get one? And I'm like, you can't. Like, they don't exist outside of this. Like, and they're like, hey, can you make me one? And I'm like, I can't. Like, I watched how it was made. I could make you a bad one. But
we had dudes hitting us up, and I'm like, no, we're not selling them to you.
Exactly. And so
you got to get them through the guy.
So like a year later, I was like, fine. And I had some interaction with John where I was like, would you be willing to do this again? And John was like, sure. I think I still have the SO sample around. I guess I could do another one. And I was like, all right, we'll do a small batch. Give me like 50 of them or something to that effect. I was like, but I want them to be special so that the last set is different because I've watched that work really well for John. So I'm like, this time I still want to do Cryptex. So we'll do Raid with orange thread. It'll be nerfy, right? Bright neon on a white, black thing. And they were gone like immediately. I had so many people that wanted them from the past that I put them on my web store, and they no Kickstarter this time, and they were gone.
You want to sell a bunch of them. You want to see a real big number. It's multicam black with red.
I mean, that might be the next one if you're willing, because I do get messages still where people are like, I would do
it multicam black red thread with red poles on it, right? Just the poles in red.
That'd be sharp. But we should, you know, occasionally the demand will build up so much that I come to John and I'm like, all right, I guess we should do a round 3. I would love to do multicam black with red because that's your jam, and that kind of completes the cycle. And I'm sure that they'd be gone like in a day or two. If I put them up one weekend as like and that's probably what I'll do because that's my latest lesson from you is that I need a newsletter. We just started doing a newsletter. It's going really well. So it might be like if you want one of these things, you know, you buy X or something along that line. Or there's a code one weekend that allows people who are following the newsletter to get them before everybody else. Because otherwise they just sell to whoever happens to be awake at the time that they go out. But so that's the scabbard rig. Carrie, I think that you already have one, but I am aware that people sometimes want 2, one for each leg. That is not necessarily what I designed them for. One leg is to slide on, the other leg is to hold your ammo. But I think that there is a world where after the Self-Reliance Festival, John might be willing to consider another batch.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Your next move is get with Katanica and have them do a custom short for you.
I want a Drac short so bad. I just finally wore a hole into my SOE Katanica shorts, and I'm a little heartbroken about it. When it's colder or if I'm flying, I wear the Ranger pants. So the Ranger pants are really, really slick too. They're great for holding money, I find, because you have one leg that's money for you and then one leg that's money for other people.
A lot of pockets. It's got slots for pin tubes. People that don't know the brand Katanica, they kind of got famous. The big bomb-looking jacket, like bomb suit jackets that Mythbusters wore, that's Katanica. U.S. made, West Coast manufacturing. Lynn, I talked to him yesterday, the CEO of the company. Just great dudes. We just push all kinds of traffic to them, and we don't have an affiliate code or nothing. It's a product that I believe in so much so that we buy them for our employees even.
I did the same thing. All of my guys at the shop, the ones who manage the web store, they have Katanica shorts, and it's just, you don't even realize how helpful it is to have a dedicated pocket for everything from your phone to your Sharpie to your pen, especially if you're labeling packages and labeling bins and moving stuff. Plus, you can hang tools off of them so that you don't have to look for your deburring tool and all sorts of stuff like that. I mean, they're pretty top. They're designed for like gunfighters, but they work really well for people who make stuff. And
somebody said do it on April Fool's Day. Yeah. So we run promos, right? We did an April Fool's Day promo this year, and you get something. We give you something silly or fun, but with a real pouch that has a real use, like International Rat Day, right? We bought 1,000 actual rat traps, built a pouch for it, and we sent out rat traps. That was the free thing. You got to buy $65 and then you get the free deal, right? Well, you can take a rat trap, screw it on a tree, catch squirrels, right? So it has a real world application, but the pouch is actually a cell phone pouch. And then for April Fool's Day, we took the freeze dryer and we freeze dried Brussels sprouts. We put a lollipop stick on it and dipped them in white chocolate. And then we put them in a tourniquet pouch. So you got these things you thought were chocolate. When you bit into it, it was a freeze dried Brussels sprout. April Fool's Day. But the pouch is real. You can put a tourniquet in it. And they didn't taste bad, but along the lines of, we do stuff all the time like that. We actually did a April Fool's.
My closet has a different SOE bag for different events. I've got one that I take to my nonprofit Nerf wars. I've got a travel one that has like my usual outfits and gear in it. And then I've got just like I don't have a day pack anymore, but that is a story for another live stream.
Yeah, you'll have one shortly.
Excellent. I do appreciate that. That's the biggest funny thing about that is the Californians' reaction to that were that it was normal. And I was like, hate that.
It was he got it stolen out of his car.
Yeah, our car was burglarized 30 minutes into landing in California. And everybody was like, that's normal. And I'm like, nah, for me it's not. There were 8 witnesses. That's the part that's abnormal to me. I would understand if like I had parked in a seedy place and my car got smashed and got stolen. But it was like I stopped at a burger joint at 11 p.m. on my way to my hotel. There were 8 witnesses. And I was like,
you didn't say anything?
In Georgia, if 8 people see you smash a car window and grab bags out of it, you're not leaving the cheeseburger parking.
No.
Like,
right.
But the funniest reaction was the next day. So like, I mean, what do? You lick your wounds. You still are there to do business and you have an event to run. So I went to Target. I bought a laptop. I bought clothes for me and my guys. I bought toothbrushes and deodorant and like all the shit that we needed that we no longer had. And it wound up being like a $1,200 Target run because of all the XYZ. And the lady at the checkout was like, you guys you too old for college. Like, I'm like, no, we got robbed yesterday, and this is me rebuilding our life for the weekend. And she was like, oh, welcome to California. And I was like, I guess I was so emotionally frayed at that point that I was like, really? Welcome to that's what I get? Like, are you serious right now? I'm so tempted to go to Walmart. Like, if I hadn't already done an hour of trying to find the only backpack in the store, I would, but.
Yeah, that would hurt. Losing the bag would hurt as much as losing the stuff in the bag.
Yeah, so the only instance is the worst stuff is I lost my passport was in there. And that stinks because I hate the idea of somebody running around as me.
Yeah.
And I lost my computer, which has, files and precious things on it, but a lot of it's in the cloud now. So it winds up not being that bad. But the funniest part and the reason that I guess it's worth talking about is I just bought a Typhon day pack with red thread. And I was like, John, I don't know what to tell you, man. Do you have any left? And the same way that the scabbards go, right? Like he's like, no, dude.
No.
I put it on the newsletter. They sold out immediately. You bought one of 3 of them or whatever. They're gone. I'm like, yep. I was almost embarrassed to tell him. I was embarrassed to tell a lot of people for a while because I felt like it makes you feel small being robbed.
Yeah.
And then I was like, there was nothing I could do about it. And like at the end of the day, I'm super thrilled that I wasn't present for it. Like if my car has to be smashed and my stuff has to be stolen, I'd rather it not be at gunpoint. So in all honesty, I'm sort of over it at this point. I've already replaced the laptop. I have clothes at home. The event ran fine. It turns out that the government replacing passports right now is a nightmare, but I should be able to do it before I head to London in a month or so. I got lucky, right? Insofar as I'm unlucky, I got lucky. The emergency passport replacement office where they can print one for you in person is in my city. So it's in Atlanta. So as long as you're within 15 days of your flight out of the country window, you can go in, and as long as you fork over like $200, they'll take care of you. But I think that the only 2 things that I'm like really truly chewed up about are I hate that I lost my special backpack that I only got to use for like 2 weeks, and I can't stand that there's somebody out there running around as me with my passport. Like that drives me up a wall. I can't wait for it to show up at a crime scene. Somebody's gonna be like, "Hey man, did you do a burglary in San Francisco?" And I'm gonna be like, "No, kind of. Sure. Will you do police work if I say yes?" But
or you end up on the no-fly list over some nonsense.
Yeah, I've been on that list.
That would be even worse. Yeah. So
it sucks. They pull you aside every freaking time.
Did you get off the no-fly list?
I am off the no-fly list. Somebody with my name was on it. I guess I'll put it that way. Somebody with my name. It was not me specifically, but yeah, I have a common enough name that there are multiple me's in the city. So
right.
What's the strangest thing you have printed?
Oh man. What's the rating for this stream?
Oh, you can say whatever you want.
All right. I had a guy who for the longest time was joking about it, and it's on Thingiverse. It's called the GoPro human attachment. I told him up and down, I was like, I'm not going to do that. That's really
like a tail.
Yeah. And so I ended up printing a GoPro attachment where it's got the GoPro mount, and then it's got a way to mount to a human being.
It's a butt plug.
And and I gave it to him as like a prank gift because he wouldn't shut up about it. And he claims he's never used it, but I'm like, you didn't talk about this thing for like 2 years.
I promise you, Pierre wants one.
All right. I mean, I still have the file, man.
I mean, you'll have your printer at the festival.
Exactly.
Will Pierre be there?
We'll crank one out. Extra large, right, buddy? So that's the goofiest thing that I think I've ever printed. Probably. The spoons are up there. Like I would argue that the spoons are a very weird thing.
I think they're very cool though.
But it wound up once you size large. Yes, sir. It wound up being a pretty cool project in the end.
What program is best for modeling for a beginner?
So there's online digital 3D modeling software called Tinkercad, which Tinkercad gets a bad rap because if you do anything professionally, Tinkercad is really bad. I'm a big believer that having all of your files available on the internet all the time is in and of itself valuable. I think that even if you didn't design it in Tinkercad, having it in Tinkercad is valuable. I like that Tinkercad is free. I like that Tinkercad has a tutorial. I like that Tinkercad will tell you if there's an error in your file. I can tell you that for work, we use a program called Fusion 360. For certain clients, we use SolidWorks. Those are like really old companies want you to work in SolidWorks. So we have a license for SolidWorks. When we do things in-house, we use Fusion 360 because it's a very lean, also cloud-based, very, high-level program that I understand and my senior designer understands. And that's the most important part, is that you both speak the same language. But for getting started, I think that Tinkercad, you could literally go there after this live stream, tinkercad.com, and you could start learning about modeling. And similar to how if you show up at SOE and ask how to make things, John tells you that it's third grade cutting shapes. Modeling your first thing in Tinkercad is dragging shapes from the tool and putting the shapes together. No sewing required.
And you could do that even before you own a 3D printer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could start designing your files long before you have the machine. You could design your files and then take them to a makerspace and have somebody who's familiar with the machine print them for you. Again, like I like to think of it as an all-encompassing skill of like, you know, measuring, modeling, designing, printing, prototyping, you know, polishing. But any one of those skills independently of itself fits into somebody else's workflow pretty seamlessly. If you're a really good designer and you don't know anything about 3D printing, you know, that's quite literally a profession. I pay a guy with a industrial design degree a very fair salary to design parts that fit into other people's stuff that fits into our stuff. He's super brilliant. He is a much better designer than I am. I would argue that I'm a better engineer than he is, and that's kind of how it's supposed to go. So each facet is, I pay a different guy a completely different salary, and all he does is, you know, run, fix printers. With 40 printers, when you say that you have 40 printers running all the time, what you really have is 30 printers running all the time and 10 printers that are down. And so his whole job is turn 10 down printers into a different 10 down printers. So that we have 10 printers running or 30 printers running all the time. And that's everything from the technicals of replacing servos and motors. That's replacing the thermistor or the sensors on the beds to make sure that the temperature stays consistent. Sometimes it's the knowledge and the experience to know that if a machine is truly foobarred, it's coming into my office and being like, hey boss, we need a new one of these, but I have, you know, 5 out of 10 parts are good and I've already stripped them and I've already, you know, thrown the rest in the recycling. So that's, again, like if you want to get into really into it, there eventually is merit in running mostly the same machine. So we use, like I said, almost exclusively Prusa Mark IIIs and Prusa Minis, and we have a graveyard of parts for those that we could keep them running for the next 20 years with no, you know, input necessarily, which is in and of itself kind of cool and fits the theme.
That's really cool.
Any concern with difficulty of importation in the near future with those machines from that area?
I haven't detected anything along that line. There are a lot of Prusas in North America just because this is, I mean, if you get into this, you're going to hear the word Prusa. It's the guy's last name, Joseph Prusa, a lot. It really is the standard in terms of open source machines. Like a lot of machines come from companies that, you know, they have a closed source system. They have a closed source software. They want you to buy into their ecosystem. The nature of 3D printing and self-reliance and DIY is such that there were actually terrific rewards for approaching the business from that aspect. And so he's achieved a level of ubiquity that really serves that audience. And he's, you know, I mean, he's a celebrity within the 3D printing space. I would argue that you'd have just as much difficulty in a world that's as complicated and multifaceted as it is right now. The same level of difficulty getting a machine out of the Czech Republic. You could argue that everything from MakerBot and Dremel and, you know, Creality is coming out of China, and who knows when that faucet closes too. So
Pierre asked, what kind of computers are you running?
Man, I get flack for this. So I am a compy guy, but I run my business on an iPhone, not an Android, which people chew me out for. And my laptop that I recently replaced is I use an Alienware M15. And it's half that Alienware makes, like Dell makes damn fine machines. As far as laptops go, when you're doing a lot of modeling and a lot of rendering, that's a lot like gaming. So you want a gaming machine with a pretty hardcore graphics card. But the honest to goodness truth is I use an Alienware as opposed to an XPS because I really like the Alienware logo. I like that when I'm sitting in the airport, it's my glowing alien head logo, and I see it on my way back from the bathroom. And the truth is that high school me really wanted an Alienware and could never, ever afford one.
Yeah.
So now I have an Alienware so that high school me knows that we did a good thing.
That's not an unimportant thing.
So Josh says Josh says he has a hard time with adhesion between parts when using Tinkercad.
Oh, you've got to merge them. I thought that was about to be bed adhesion, and I was going to start pulling out glue sticks and stuff. But fun fact, if you have issues with bed adhesion in 3D printing, I actually use high-strength hairspray. I just pull the bed off, blast it, and put it back on, and it's just enough stick that it still pops off easy. You don't want to do it on the machine because spraying hairspray glue on all of your bands and belts is not great, but I digress. In Tinkercad, the way that you merge shapes and you want them to be one part, so two is one, is you want to push them a little further than you need to, and then you use the merge feature to mesh them into one part. And then if you really want to double down on these are one part, you save it as a new part and then just start a new project. Because again, the software is entirely free and entirely cloud-based. So with a decent internet connection, you could keep iterating to have your kind of progress history.
So
go ahead.
While we're talking about computers, you should check out a dude named Dan Millionaire Code. Dan's Millionaire Code on Instagram. U.S. computer parts, lifetime warranty on all of the parts. I don't know him. A friend of mine is good friends with him, and I watched a couple of his videos, and he said some things that were kind of jumped out to me as far as computers went. So I was just throwing his name out for anybody listening. Secondly, I wanted to ask something we haven't touched on yet with the 3D printing stuff. We keep hearing the politicians talk about ghost guns and printed guns and crime and all this. Can you really, I mean, are people really printing, and what does that printed gun look like compared to a real firearm?
Gotcha. I guess for the sake of my dog, I will mention that all of this is theoretical, but how do I put this? We start getting really political this way, and it makes the conversation more exciting and more dynamic. But the answer is that when most people think about 3D printed guns, they think about like noisy cricket style, like nail PVC 3D printed mechanism, shoots 122, like long rifle shot out of a pin tube or whatever. And you're effectively creating like almost a prison zip gun with a 3D printer. And that's the proverbial liberator, right? That went around a while ago that everybody was freaking out about, is that you could buy the files or find the files, or you'd get them off the dark web or something along that line. And then you would make your zip gun thing. And the worry was that, criminals would be running around with these things like committing crimes and murdering people. And then you'd never be able to trace them because they would just throw away this plastic gun.
Well, it seems like, I mean, you haven't seen it show. I mean, you've seen plenty of shootings recently, right, and none of them have had, I mean, those guys seem to have no issues getting real guns.
Right. So
my theory is that there is a entity that is handing those to people, and they are not being procured through real measures. But I mean, they don't seem to have to 3D print a gun.
I mean, my argument would be that while, theoretically the technology exists, I have an SLS machine in the garage right now that costs $25,000. It prints powder in a matrix using a heated chamber, and it creates things that are, stronger and lighter than steel. It's really an impressive nylon composite. But here's the reality of it is, if I wanted to theoretically model an AR-15 lower and print a lower for a rifle on that machine in my garage in the privacy of my own home, I think that it's very reasonable to say that with the technology, I could do that. And I also think that it would work. And I'm tentatively aware that other people have done that. But we are talking about a very expensive machine, a very high level of technical knowledge, a level of machining, fit, and finish that achieves this end. And, I guess as sensitive as I can be to the greater issue at hand, the kind of people who have that technology, that money, those resources, that knowledge to build something like that, I do not believe are the kind of people committing, incredibly selfish and foolish crimes. And I think that if they were, they're also the kind of people who could just go buy a gun, and that's what they do. It's not the ideal medium to create a firearm. And so while it's all theoretically possible, at least, you know, the way that the world is set up right now in America, there's no reason to. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, people want to talk about like either they'll be like, oh, you know, a plastic gun would be unreliable and dangerous. And I'm like, yeah, but you carry a Glock. Like, so
what do you think they're really after? What do you think it's about?
I try not to think about it at all. As a guy who sells toy guns, I really try not to delve into the minds of people who are either monstrous or monster hunters. I just, would assume throw my hands up and be like, I make toys, man. But I don't understand it. I think that the ATF, wants to regulate as much as they can. I think that that's their purpose. I think that that's, what they want to do. And anything that they don't understand or have comprehensive knowledge of, it's easier to just kind of be like, no, than to try and figure out a rule or a case for it. I think that we watch them struggle constantly with the definitions of accessories and, like I think that they struggle from an issue of intent versus reality. Like they know what they want to accomplish, but the reality is an almost impossible matrix of rules that they have to navigate. And then, at the end of the day, you've got for every good guy and every criminal, there's 100 keyboard warriors playing what if. And I think that makes the entire conversation kind of nuanced and stupid. And I'm also very comfortable admitting that it's just not my realm of expertise.
So I saw a politician, right? Some 90-year-old politician a year or so ago talking about how we need to ban these 3D printers. I realize you were alive before electricity. I think that cat's already out of the bag. I don't think that's even it's not even a possibility, right?
I mean, so the fact of the matter is that, like, again, you start reaching thresholds of knowledge and thresholds of fabrication and technology. Like if 3D printers were banned and I wanted a 3D printer, I could make a 3D printer. Like I have made 3D printers from scratch out of nothing. I could buy extruded aluminum to create a gantry and a servo and an Arduino, and I could effectively build a bad 3D printer. I also think that given that you can make a 3D printer with a 3D printer, that the idea of, banning them outright is not just insane, but also impossible. And then more to the point, I don't think that it serves the goal that they're trying to accomplish. If you're like, people could print guns with 3D printers, so therefore we should ban 3D printers, just straight facts. Most people do not have the knowledge or the ability to print something that can, fire a cartridge. And even if they do, like 99% of people with 3D printers don't have $25,000 machines and can't build something that could handle like sustainable cartridge fire. And so at the end of the day, like if you're going to ban 3D printers because you're worried about people making firearms, you need to go ban people from buying pipes at Lowe's first. Like, what are you doing? Like,
or cars. I mean,
yeah, exactly. I mean, there's infinite. I mean, what is it? London. Oh man, I should not start speaking politically because it just betrays how little I understand about laws and lawmakers. But London banned knives, right? Like you can't have a pocket knife in London. And at the same time, you can absolutely be a sous chef at a restaurant and walk around with your knife set and ride it on the tube and take it with you. And it's like, okay, so like, we're intent versus reality versus practicality is this really messy triangle where it's like, okay, so like, is it I can't have a knife unless I can prove to you that I'm a sous chef? Is it I can't have a knife, but I can absolutely have my contractor hammer, which has a knife? Like, or whatever it is. Like, is it I can't have a knife if I look like I'm a criminal to you?
More people in the United States are killed with hammers than with firearms. More people in the United States are killed with hands than with firearms.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
firearms are totally the problem according to the narrative.
Right. And when you hear the firearm numbers, what is it? 89% of handgun deaths they're suicide. They're self-inflicted. Yeah.
Well, the other thing they don't collect good information on, John, is what has been deterred by the presence of a firearm.
Right. Well, I mean, we just had a lady.
Of it can stop it.
Yep.
And it's not even reported. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, a lady just shot somebody and stopped what could have been a mass shooting. Like,
but that's
within
not a good
days
story.
No, it doesn't
Not a
mean
good story. That doesn't hit the news cycle.
Yeah.
I'm hearing about that from you. Whereas, like, I know all about what happened in Texas, and I was busy those days. I woke up and felt sick. I was like, oh my, it's just, I don't know. In general, I think that the ethos of equalizers and training and, you know, knowing what you're doing and doing the best you can is about all I can hope for.
You know, 3D printers are the same kind of equalizer, though. Like, not, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I think that
it takes manufacturing out of this. You have to go big or go home for it to be reasonable to everybody is their own manufacturer. It's decentralizing things just like cryptocurrency, which is why I'm surprised more people in our network aren't really excited about them.
Well, so, I mean, I guess to that point, 3D printer reduces your MOQ of a part from like, oh, I need 50,000 of these to make it financially feasible to, oh, I can make 2 of them and be fine. And I would argue that YouTube is the same thing 10 years ago. You know, formal specialized skill set knowledges, how-tos went from being, I need to find an apprenticeship, or I need to, you know, find a course at a community college. I need to, you know, find a mentor to learn this, is now freely and readily available for anyone. Like, and it's very exciting in that way that, you know, you could effectively acquire all of the skills that you needed to be Cisco network certified on the internet now, as opposed to, you know, becoming a full-blown engineer. You could get a certificate and be making engineer money, which is pretty cool. In general, I find that the more education you can put in the hands of just about anybody, the better their life is going to be and the life around them. Are there food safe spools of plastic available? Absolutely, there are. All of the plastic is food safe. It's not all dishwasher safe because dishwashers get hot. ABS, like, you eat out of ABS all the time. Any container that you're consuming food out of, frequently, if you have plastic silverware or plates, that's ABS plastic that was injection molded. The way that it becomes not food safe, and the reason that it's complicated, is it's like the maximally effective mercenaries jokes, right? It's like everything is airdroppable once. Everything is food safe once. But the way that 3D printers work, they make things that, here's a perfect example. This is a toy, but is it not going to come off the stand? I need it to come off the stand. All right, so this is the Ace of Spades from Destiny. It's a video game. It was really popular. Now it's less popular. That's not the point. When you 3D print things, the way that they go layer by layer by layer, I can give you some ASMR here. If you hear that, that's the layer lines scratching against my fingernail. You can almost see them there in the glare. It looks pretty good on camera, but those layer lines are micro ribs, effectively, going all up and down the part. If you print really fine, they're really small. If you print really fast, they tend to be bigger. And the problem with quote unquote food safe is that your food and your bodily fluids as you eat are going to get in those micro layer lines that have been printed. So as opposed to an injection molded spoon, which is smooth, and you could use over and over again because it is smooth and you can just wash it off, things have a bad habit of getting trapped in nooks and crannies like that. And so everything is food safe once. But if you need to use your 3D printed spoon a week later and you did not clean it to whatever your standard of cleanliness is, now all of a sudden you have giardia and it's not my fault. So
that makes sense. Is that where the resin machine would be more?
So the resin machine has layer lines. A good way to describe it is a fine part in additive is a 0.1 millimeter layer line going up. So 0.1 millimeters, tick, 0.1 millimeters, tick, tick, tick. Fast ones will do 0.25, which, you know, just reduces the time it takes by half, effectively. These guys start going into effectively pixels and nanometers, so you can get a far finer layer line to the degree that, you know, it would be closer to food safe. But like I said, when I made those spoons, I resin printed them so that there were virtually imperceptible layer lines. But then when I finally did the cast, I could still see some lines from the print in the silver. And so I went through and I had a buffing wheel and I ground everything out and polished it. And that's how you get to food safe. And again, that like food safe means different things to different people. It doesn't necessarily, that's not a standard so much as it's a comfort for you. I would not want to eat with a 3D printed spoon more than once, but I would be very comfortable doing it the first time. And it kind of kicks back to my original thing, which is like, the more knowledge you have, the easier it is to make decisions like that for yourself. So people like to talk all the time about food safe and 3D printing, and they'll talk about different plastics. They'll be like, oh, PLA isn't food safe, whereas ABS is, because you know, ABS is a safer thermoplastic than PLA. PLA is made out of corn. You can eat PLA. It's in that way, it's truly food safe. It's food. It's just really bad food.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Dawn what she was thinking. Like, what did she mean?
Dry storage.
So you like printing buckets or whatever?
And that way you're fine. Yeah, if you wanted to print storage containers, you could very easily seal them. I store coins in tubes, and the matrix of the print lines in a spiral when I create a screw-on cap is tight enough that they're completely airtight. So they don't tarnish. And I feel like if my coins don't tarnish, your food won't spoil.
And if you're really concerned about it, you can go Mylar inside that, but that's...
Yeah, I was going to say, or you could throw a Ziploc bag inside and then screw down onto the Ziploc bag and create kind of a... Isn't that how cans work? Aluminum cans have like a thin layer of plastic inside.
They have something.
I think. Otherwise, our soup would taste like tin.
Yeah, it'd be gross. I'll be rust colored too, probably.
I believe that. Well, I think we're coming up on 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I have rambled into all sorts of worlds that I don't understand. So
that's perfect. That's exactly what happens on these things.
Excellent.
You're going to get like that times 100 at Self-Reliance Festival. Hey, thanks for making time today. Anything you want to promote before we hop off?
I mean, I guess just the festival. I assume that all of your listeners, viewers, etc., are going to be there. I'm excited to meet you. You can catch me off camera where I'll express other versions of
actual opinions.
I'm excited to meet you guys. I'm excited to share 3D printing with people who otherwise, might not be as exposed to it on as intimate a level. I'm bringing all sorts of tchotchkes and kind of tools and things to showcase why it's really neat and why it's special to me. And I'm just as happy as John to talk about, macro level stuff. If you're curious about my business or how that works, or if you have questions about the toy industry or anything like that, I mean, I'm just happy to add a different perspective to the conversation that might not always be available in a world full of, butchers and leather makers and knife makers and tactical guys and danger boys.
Great. John, anything you want to say before we sign off?
I do a live feed every night at 9 o'clock. We can have these conversations on YouTube, 9 o'clock, join in. We can talk about whatever you want. Josh and Pierre are on here. I want to say that those are two of the most important people in the world to me. And hi, guys, what's up? And Drac, you definitely have expanded the way I look at things and the way I do things as well. And watching you scale and grow your business has definitely made me look to a higher level as well, man.
Well, it kind of rising tide, all boats.
Yeah. Nicole, I just saw a ton of stuff come in here. I'm assuming it's for Self-Reliance Festival.
It is.
Stuff you had shipped in here.
Yep. Why ship it here and bring it there? That's all.
Yeah.
Huge waste of my time. Guys, thanks for joining the live stream. We'll be live next Tuesday with Jack Spirko at 12:30. And do get your tickets for Self-Reliance Festival, because the online ticket sales are not very far from being sold out or turned off. And then it goes up $15 at the door. If you want to hear more about homesteading life and the coffee business, you can check out my podcast, That's Living Free in Tennessee. I'll probably run the audio from this. Probably going to divide it into 2 shows, though, because we had a good chat on this one. Thank you, Drac, again for making time. And I look forward to seeing you in person in a week.
Absolutely.
Real quick, also, we do a T-shirt every week. We do 120 pieces. They say something to current times. Typically, this says, "I'm not participating in your new normal." You can see these shirts at SOE Tactical Gear, and we typically show them very first on the live feed at 9 o'clock on Mondays.
Yeah, and John and I did not coordinate this today. It just happens.
That's this week's shirt. What are you talking about?
Well, you know.
Happens.
Okay.
Awesome.
Talk to you guys later.
See ya.